Hey Quirky, Whatif here. The same day Izuku Midoriya lost the person most precious to him was the same day destiny handed him the darkest power in existence. Not one for all. Not hope. But all for one. A quirk feared by heroes, worshipped by monsters, and stained with generations of blood. Anyone else would have fallen into darkness. Anyone else would have become the next demon king. But Izuku? He made a promise through tears and rage. No one will ever lose their loved ones again. To the innocent, he becomes a guardian angel willing to dirty his hands for peace. To villains, he becomes a nightmare walking through the shadows, stealing quirks, crushing empires, and executing evil without hesitation. The hero commission fears him. The underworld trembles at the mention of his name. Even pro-heroes can't decide whether his humanity's salvation, or its next catastrophe. Because Izuku Midoriya doesn't save people like All Might did. He saves them permanently. Every battle pushes him closer to the line between protector and tyrant. Every stolen quirk whispers temptation into his soul. And as society begins depending on his terrifying strength, the question becomes impossible to ignore. Can someone wield the power of the greatest villain in history without becoming him? This is the story of a boy carrying both mercy and judgment in his hands. The savior. The executioner. The one the world will come to know as Entity. Let's go. Before we dive in, if you enjoy dark, powerful what-if stories like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life, and it only takes a second. Now, let's begin.
Chapter 1, My Worst Day. I live in a society where 80% of the population has powers or peculiarities called quirks. It is basically a society where powers abound and a career was created for those people who want to make use of their quirks for good. Quirks usually present in childhood, but I never presented one. When I was checked in the hospital, they told me that it was because I am completely normal and I have a joint that people with quirks do not. In short, I'm going to fuck myself and I won't have superpowers to save people. The reason why I wanted to be a hero is easy. I admired All Might, the #1 hero who always saved people with a dazzling smile on his face. Simply for me, that was and is the coolest thing in the world, and what child wouldn't dream of being a hero with such an example? So when I received the news that I couldn't have a quirk, I was very depressed. I couldn't fulfill my dream no matter how much I did. But I still didn't give up and studied as much as I could with the goal of being able to enter UE, which is the best hero school in the world. Definitely if I enter there, it means that I can be a hero. Truth. Today I come back from another day of school normally, another day of abuse and insults from my classmates. Why? For the simple fact of not having a quirk. My old best friend Katsuki Bakugo, because he had a very strong quirk, became self-centered and abusive to me. He nicknamed me Deku as if to say that I am useless. Over time I learned to cope with insults, and it's all thanks to the fact that there is still one person who trusts me to become a hero. That's my mother. Although it was hard for him at first to accept the fact that I would not give up on my goal of becoming a hero, over time he adapted to the idea and began to support me in any way he could. He is my only living relative because my father died on a business trip 10 years ago. I am currently 14 years old, and as I mentioned earlier, I am coming home from school. I arrive at the door of my house and enter as usual. "I'm here, Mom," I say out loud, announcing myself as I leave my shoes in the driveway. Then I go deeper into the living room and realize that my mom hasn't arrived. Now that I realize her shoes aren't at the entrance either, so I'm sure I haven't arrived from her shopping yet. I don't give it much importance, so I'm going to change into more comfortable clothes. After about 10 minutes, I'm in the living room with looser clothes like shorts and a sleeveless shirt, both in different shades of black. I get ready to sit on the couch to watch TV, but out of nowhere, ting tong. It was my doorbell. Surely it would be my mother coming back from her shopping, but I don't understand why there wouldn't be with her key. I approach the entrance and look through the peephole in the door. What I see on the other side is a police officer with a slightly sad expression. I wonder what the officer must want and slowly open the door. "Good afternoon, are you Izuku Midoriya?" The officer asks me with a look that worried me at first. If it's me, what's wrong? I ask intrigued. Officers had never come to my door because my neighborhood was so quiet. He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, boy. But your mother and Midoriya." He was silent for a few seconds. "He died during an attack by villains 6 hours ago," the policeman told me with sadness and a look of sympathy as he put a hand on my right shoulder. My eyes widened. What?" I asked with a stiff smile, taking a step back. He must be joking with me, right? Surely Kaken told him to scare me like that. The truth is not funny, I replied to the officer with a slight smile. Surely it was a bad joke that Kaken devised to give me a heart attack or something. It was simply impossible what the policeman was telling me. What a fool I was to take it seriously for a moment. However, the officer hardened his gaze with pity. "I know it's hard to accept, kid, but it's the truth. In the shopping district, a villain with metal powers attacked and caused a large sign to fall on a large crowd of innocents. Your mother was one of them, the officer explained to me as he took his cap off his head to offer his condolences as if what he said was true. It's really not funny, stop the damn joke once Kakin. I exclaimed loudly so that the fool Kakin came out of hiding to yell at me and tell me that I looked pathetic. The joke is too heavy. Surely I pay the officer very well to collaborate with him. Telling this kind of lies is very wrong. But the man's countenance did not change. Please boy, calm down and understand that this is not a joke. Your mother and co-Midoriya has died and that's the reality. I'm seriously sorry but you must accept it to move on. Tomorrow I will come again to inform you about her life insurance and funeral. Be strong, boy, the policeman told me with a firm voice in his voice, trying to relieve me. He's really a damn big liar. It's impossible that something like that happened to my mom, completely impossible. Just imagining the scene he described to me. I can't. I saw the officer get into his patrol car and leave. I stayed in my place without saying a single word. I just waited with a smile for someone, whoever, to tell me that it was the worst fucking prank they ever played on me. An idea occurs to me and I slammed the door shut to go into my living room again. I quickly reach my couch and grab my phone quickly and abruptly to quickly dial my mom's number. Please, please, please. I whisper nervously, hoping that it's all just a stupid nightmare that I'm going to wake up from at any moment. P-I-I-I, P-I-I-I, P-I-I-I. I hear my phone dialing but still no one answers and it jumps at voicemail. I listen with fear and nerves to my mother's mailbox. I still remember when she asked me for help to record it because she doesn't know how to handle technology. I don't give up and score again. The result is the same, so without stopping I score again. The result is the same. I feel tears start to come out of my sockets and run down my cheeks while I still have a faint smile waiting for my mother to answer and say that everything is fine. Then I dial again. There is no answer. Little by little my hands begin to tremble, then I dial again. No one answers again. I'm scared, very scared. I'll repeat it as many times as necessary. It's impossible that my mom died crushed like a cockroach by a big sign. The damn image just doesn't fit in my head. The only person I had left was none other than my blessed mother, who this very morning bade me farewell with a kiss and a kind smile. I'm starting to shake hard and tears fall uncontrollably as I look at my phone, so with all my faith I dial my mom's phone again. P-I-I-I, P-I-I-I, P-I-I-I. There's no damn answer. Crash. I throw my phone hard at a wall and it immediately breaks. It's true, isn't it? My mother. Mom is dead and I won't see her again. Isn't it a joke of Katchin's or my worst nightmare, is it? It's a fact that I seem to have to accept. My mom died and I'll never be able to see her smile again. I cry uncontrollably on my couch while clenching my fists with a lot of force and rage. What fault did she have for being a victim of a damn villain? And the most damned surely even if he is arrested he would continue to live and breathe. A right he doesn't have for doing that to my mother. That wretch killed my mother. N-O-O-O. I scream loudly and angrily as I get up from the couch to give him several hate-filled kicks pretending to be the damn wretch who murdered my innocent and great mom. I continued to attack the furniture until I didn't have the energy to do it anymore. Inconsolably I kept crying with rage thinking about how to find and make the wretch pay. The officer didn't say that he had been arrested but even if I wanted to kill him I don't have the power to do it. However, I don't care. I can't let this stay like this. I can't let this stay like this. You're interesting, boy, said a deep voice that seemed to come from the window of the shed next to the living room. I was startled with panic and noticed that outside there is a man in a black formal suit and wearing a black mask in the shape of a skull with tubes of the same color on its sides that seemed to connect in the back area of the mask, resembling Darth Vader in some ways. I couldn't articulate any words because of the confusion and the fact that my throat hurt from crying and screaming. The intimidating man calmly opened the window and entered the room and then approached me. With fear I hugged my legs and covered my face hoping that he would not hurt me but he simply knelt in front of me. I know everything that happened to you, Izuku. When he said my name, a shiver ran down my spine. I understand your hatred and your sadness completely. All this would not have happened if the heroes had done their job well, don't you think? Your loss has affected you a lot and I understand it. So I offer you the opportunity to change society so that no one else suffers like you do today. The man said to me with an unsettling calm and tranquility while stroking my hair with his right hand. Honestly, it didn't feel that bad what the man said and conveyed to me, but I still couldn't get several unknowns out of my head. My name is irrelevant right now. The important thing is that I have a quirk called All for One and this allows me to steal, make other people's quirks my own and also allows me to give them to other individuals. So he is the most powerful and useful quirk for you. His words did nothing but confuse me, but before I could ask him, he took me by both shoulders in what I suppose was a gesture to make me understand the seriousness of the matter. But it's impossible to do that, isn't it? That there was a particularity with the description you're giving me. Someone with that particularity would be too powerful. It would be a tragedy if that power was in the wrong hands. As if seeing right through me, the man laughed softly before standing up. I am offering you this quirk so that you can change this society to your liking, that you form it to your will, that the incompetent heroes disappear and that your word is law for all. The heroes will not be an impediment to you and you will be able to handle them as you please. No one will be able to stop you and you will get this society to open its eyes so that they see that the real problem lies in the very nature of its beloved peace. The strongest make the changes while the weak are mere pawns who are below the strong. His words had a passion and conviction that unsettled me and even convinced me at times when I saw him raising a fist. I'm sure I'm red-eyed from crying, but I could swear that his speech evoked a brief admiration in a part of me that I didn't know existed. If what this man says is true, I could take revenge for my mother. I could make sure that no one ever lost a loved one again. I could help others as I have dreamed since I was a child. He looked back at me and held out his hand. So what's your answer, Izuku? Do you accept to inherit this power to change this society that turned its back on your mother? He asked me with a softness that was out of tune with how threatening he looks with that mask on, but that nevertheless managed to reach me. Self-conscious, I nodded my head. I accept your offer, I replied in a broken, hoarse tone as I reached out my hand to take his, but it was seconds after shaking his hand that a great pain ran through my body. Arrghhhh. I felt as if every bone in my body was breaking, as every molecule screamed in pain as if my heart was being stabbed 100 times. The man wouldn't let go of my hand even though he saw all the suffering I caused me, as if he expected something from all this pain. Did this man want to kill me? Was it all a fucking deception? Am I going to die without even making a change for the better in society? Won't I be able to avenge my mom? No, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to die today. I have to live for my mother who would like to continue with my life. I won't let this man murder me. I won't die. Grrushh. In the blink of an eye, I moved my free hand to punch the man in the stomach, but it all happened in a different way than I planned. My arm turned into a large metal blade that pierced the stomach of the man in the suit, who with a little pain bent in on himself. However, he remained standing for several more seconds before releasing my hand and proceeding to kneel in front of me again. My blade was still stuck in him, and then at some point the pain stopped. I look completely terrified at the state of my arm, but out of nowhere I feel a hand on my head and I realize that it is the man who seems to still have something to say to me despite being badly injured. All for one's move has been successful, Izuku. You may be angry with me later, but it's too late to back down. And if you happen to see a boy named Tamura Shigaraki, please tell him that I went far away and that I won't come back, but that he still follows his goals, the masked man told me before coughing into his helmet. The warm blood that flows from the deep wound I made stained my arm that returned to its normal shape. After almost a minute of dry cough, it fell silent and his hand on my head lost strength at the same time that I stopped hearing the hoarse breathing of his mask. I widened my eyes as I realized that this man died by my hand. Before anything else, I was surprised to watch as the man's corpse turned into black dust that rose into the air before quickly entering my mouth without me being able to help it. I could feel a sense of unsettling serenity invade me and like a scorching heat runs through my body. Maybe it was due to that all-for-one transfer you mentioned, but I feel like I now have the ability to control that quirk. I wouldn't know how to explain it, but it's like I've been mine all my life. I felt powerful for the first time in my life. The feeling of having so many particularities inside me is indescribable. I only needed a brief look inside me to understand the amount of dangerous particularities that this guy had and still decided to give me, but I was paralyzed when I realized that I pierced the man's stomach with my arm turned into a metal edge. I remember the words of the officer who came a while ago. A villain with metal powers attacked and caused a large sign to fall on a large crowd of innocents. Your mother was one of them. It can't be a coincidence. A guy who owns a metal quirk comes to my house on the same day that a villain with a described peculiarity just like murdered my mother. You didn't have to be a genius to understand. Just putting all the pieces together, I understood that the man who gave me all for one is the same one who killed my mother. Curse! I roared and hit the ground hard, causing the house to shake in response to my anger. What the fuck did he do it for? What the fuck did he want to prove by killing my mother? Am I part of an experiment of his or what? I gritted my teeth tightly, pressing my forehead into the floor as I clenched my fists so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I don't get it, but it doesn't make sense. I'm not going to get anything back by losing my temper. I didn't know where this self-control came from, but taking deep breaths I found myself on my knees with my arms clinging unwillingly. Only my frown remained. Whatever it is, that man had a plan for me with that speech of his, and I'm definitely not going to please him. I am offering you this quirk so that you can change this society to your liking, that you form it to your will, that the incompetent heroes disappear and that your word is law for all. The heroes will not be an impediment to you and you will be able to handle them as you please. For a moment I was seriously tempted by his words, but if I have this power I will use it for good and not for evil. I will not fulfill the will of my mother's murderer. Maybe now, may I be alone now, but I still won't let anyone lose a loved one. I must not cry anymore. I will have to be able to endure the sadness from here on out. I must make mom proud. I will graduate from UE and I will be a hero. No one will make fun of me anymore or stop me from achieving it. I have decided, no innocent will die while I am there. I will become an existence that will frighten anyone who wants to harm and cause chaos. I lowered my gaze to my fists. Now I have to deal with my mother's absence and continue attending school. I have to prepare myself now to enter UE, but even so I will not just watch when someone is in danger, with or without a license. I will save whoever needs it. That's my goal, I must never forget it. After a minute's silence, Izuku stood up with a tempered determination in his eyes, wiped the residual tears from his face, and then walked over to where his phone was destroyed into pieces. He sighed and reached out to the damaged device that as if by magic began to slowly reassemble as the pieces floated and began to come together, telekinesis or time control. The truth doesn't matter right now. After a minute of waiting, the phone was as if it had never been broken. The phone floated back into his hand, he turned it on, and he placed in his gallery a picture of his mother smiling happily with him in her arms the day she gave birth to him. He felt his heart tighten as he realized that she is no longer in this world, but he still couldn't help but smile softly at seeing her so cheerful. I love you, Mom. I hope you're watching me when I save people. I'll prevent there from being more victims of villains like you, the green-haired man said to his late mother, setting the image as his wallpaper. He put away his phone so that he could be left alone in the sad silence of the house, a place that is now a source of many memories he has with the great woman who cared for him and loved him all his life. He shook his head, trying not to be too affected by it. I guess we just have to wait until I'm accepted into UE, but now I'll need to train a lot if I want to reach my goal, he said, looking at his right fist, studying how many particularities he could manifest through this now that he has all for one. He would no longer be the weak mucosai that everyone mocked. Now he would make himself respected, and even if everyone is against him, he would become the #1 hero. If this great quirk was given to him by a villain, then he would turn it into a heroic quirk used for good. I'll start training tomorrow, he decided with a sideways smile, looking into a remote corner of the room for a set of weights that he would use very often from now on. As much as he didn't want to, this day he will remember it all his life. It is not only the day of his mother's death, but it is also the day where he gained the power to become a true hero as he has dreamed since he was a child. He spun around and headed down the hall, where he stopped in front of the door of his mother's room. He stared at her for a while before reaching for the doorknob, stopping a few inches away but forcing himself inside. She didn't like it, but she knew this room would never be used by her again. He calmly approached the bed, bent down, and a box at the back moved toward him, which he proceeded to lay on the sheets. She opened it and looked at the photo album that her mother had, taking it in her hands with a sad face before taking a seat and taking a few moments to gather her courage. She has to face the fact that the one she loved the most has died because of an unfortunate sinister. He took a deep breath and began to see the photos inside the album. For starters, there was the photo he has on his phone the day he was born. She looked so happy. The next one was from him as a baby, where she bathed him, took him for a walk, fed him, lulled him in a motherly hug, at the birthdays organized by her with a lot of effort, his first day at the nursery, she leaving him in his crib, etc. Small tears formed on the edge of her green eyes. She tries her best to withstand the pressure in her chest and the vertigo that plagues her senses. However, it is difficult to accept that she would never see her again, and there are thousands of people feeling the same for a loved one who was taken from them. It was simply heartbreaking to his soul. He came to the photos of where she took care of him and Kakin when they met to play in the park, another where she dressed him in a full-length pajamas of All Might because he had asked her to, another where she accompanied him on his first day in basic education. He remembers that day she accompanied him to the classroom. He cheered her up with a song she always hummed and then gave her his All Might doll to pluck up the courage. Then there were more recent photos, like from 2 years ago, one where he cooked with her and made her laugh, another photo where they were together but it was badly taken by her who didn't know how to use her new phone. Izuku remembered and treasured all those moments with bittersweet nostalgia, knowing that there will be no more mother and son moments to add to the album now that she is gone. Moments later, I move on to the last page of the album, where there was a photo of his mother with a gentle smile making the peace sign with him in the background studying at the dining room table. This confused the green-haired man because he didn't know when she took that photo. It was after several seconds that he remembered how 1 week he was in a lapse of exams, so he studied like crazy despite having one of the best grades in his class. With a sad grimace, he took the photo and held it up to take a closer look, the last photo of Inko Midoriya alive. If only I had known this morning that I wouldn't see her again, then she. With difficulty he contained his own frustration and prevented his hand from squeezing the picture of his dear mother. For no particular reason he turned it over and his eyes widened when he saw on the back a message with her handwriting. He swallowed hard and began to read what he had written. Me with my little hero who saved me from loneliness and gave me the great honor of being his mother. My little Izuku studies hard and strives to one day be a great hero who saves people despite all the difficulties in his way. That's the kind of son I have and I'm proud of. Thank you for being my son, Izuku. A drop fell on the back of the photo, then another. Izuku was shocked to find himself with tears escaping from his eyes and down his freckled cheeks. She tried to hold him back, she really tried, but the tears flowed non-stop with no signs of stopping. Sobs began to be heard in the room, and inevitably Izuku Midoriya was plunged into bitter and silent tears by the surge of emotions that whipped into his fragile heart after reading his mother's words. "Work hard at school today, okay, Izuku?" She encouraged him with a big smile when she saw him off in the driveway and he had to leave for school. If only I'd known he wouldn't see her anymore, I'd have said something instead of just nodding my head. Wow. She carefully held onto the photo in her hands as tears kept flowing. He has to make her proud. He will be a great hero who would save everyone who needs him as she needed him in her last moments. She would be strong as she was so many years after her father's death. She would live to fulfill her dream as she would have wanted him to do because she had his support. And so it would be. But today he is just a boy who lost his mother and wants to vent his feelings through his sad tears for her loss. But he would keep her with him both in his heart and in his memory so that she would never disappear completely. She would still live inside him, and she would be the engine that animated him when he was overwhelmed or confused. Even after the death in Midoriya, his mother would continue to support him, and that's enough for him. The next day, the night before, was truly hell for young Midoriya, but what happened will not be revealed until later. At noon, the police officer returned, as he said, with a lawyer in charge of his mother's will and would also take care of the boy's documents and legal arrangements. All of the late and Midoriya's belongings would be given to Izuku along with her bank account to pay for her studies, including college when the time came. An argument was then made about who would have custody of the green-haired man, but a tired Izuku brought up the fact that he had no living relatives and requested to live alone without adoptive family or legal guardian. The lawyer, who showed resistance at first, could not say no to the strangely calm young man and agree. So he would begin to prepare the boy's documentation once it was clarified that he would continue to attend school. And thanks to his mother's money, he would be able to support himself without the need to work for at least 4 years. So their basic needs were supposed to have already been met. The officer and the lawyer left after a while discussing various matters such as Inko's funeral. There is still a lot of paperwork to be done with the lawyer, but Izuku was already assured with an empty house full of memories in which only he would be training and studying. He would go to school as usual without worrying about getting a job thanks to his mother's efforts, so he would have time to familiarize himself with All for One and all the quirks it contains so that one day he will be the one to save them all. All for One ended up in good hands that will use it for good. That power will be the bane of countless criminals and villains who dare to do harm. From that day on, he wouldn't be the same Izuku Midoriya he used to be, but his goal hasn't really changed much. He would be the greatest hero of all. Chapter 2, I'm not the same, I'm better. A year has passed since Izuku gained his power from All for One and the death of his mother. The green-haired man with determination and conviction trained without any rest, doing a workout that can traumatize more than 100 squats, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, lifting 100 kilograms in each arm and running 100 kilometers every day without fail. His body was quickly affected by such good training and his physical appearance reflected it to a large extent. The green-haired man was already 15 years old and in his last year of high school. Despite being so young, he was 1 meter and 80 centimeters tall, had a strong and marked musculature that was not exaggerated and was ideal to attract any type of girl who saw him. The insults towards him from his companions ceased because of the intimidating aura released by the green-haired man, who was now serious, intimidating, strong, and strangely unconcerned with his surroundings. The strange thing that happened to him since the day he won the All for One is that he has had several nightmares for weeks, in which grotesque, bloody, cruel, inhuman, and even traumatizing scenes were seen. These scenes may well be fragments of memories of the ancient bear, so that he may possibly at some point come to know the reason why the man chose him to be his successor. After all, while he remembered that he had mentioned a certain Shigaraki Tamura to whom he could have given his quirk, those nightmares still caused the green-haired man to slowly get used to seeing them, but he still couldn't help but feel annoyed when appreciating the atrocities caused by the former wielder. Those fragments showed tortures, conversations, obtaining quirks, battles, and so on from the former All for One user that could be related to when Izuku absorbed the dust from the corpse of the man in a suit. Either way, those nightmares could be useful. Izuku could learn of important conversations that revealed a lot of information regarding villain society, how the previous wielder stole the quirks, and especially how he handled himself in combat. He has had an innumerable amount of battles against heroes and villains alike. The most difficult without a doubt were some in which he fought against 7 very strong individuals who always presented him with a challenge. But in the end he always won and they fled, although they always stopped his plans. In the last fight Izuku managed to see, he watched as All for One fought a woman of those 7 individuals and a silhouette of a young hero who matched him in strength. The fight was fierce and All for One managed to kill the woman he has fought with numerous times, but incredibly the silhouette of the young man managed to defeat him, leaving him in a critical state. Certainly the hero did not end up in a better state, but the point is that that was All for One's first defeat in the former wielder. In the end, what had Izuku most intrigued was the identity of the silhouette of the hero who managed to defeat the damn villain in a suit who murdered his mother for some hidden purposes. In any case, the green-haired man didn't think much about it because it could interfere with his schedule of studies, research, reading, and training. Strangely and miraculously, she could maintain a perfect balance between all of those things, including the time it takes to cook, bathe, sleep, and go to school. Katsuki, on the other hand, was really irritated by the attention his old friend was getting at school. He always insulted him in class and teased him as he always did, but no insult affected Midoriya. He simply ignored him olympically or looked at him out of the corner of his eye in an intimidating manner, causing Bakugo to give up his behavior in annoyance. On more than one occasion the blonde has wanted to confront the green-haired man outside of school, but Izuku always avoids him with serenity and nonchalance or simply intimidates him with his look. Bakugo wondered why the weak, cowardly green-haired man had always annoyed the change. In Izuku's classes, another ordinary day at school for the green-haired man who looked at his hero's notebook calmly while the teacher just gave a lecture about using the quirks for good. Katsuki was sitting in his position with his legs on the desk, showing that he didn't care at all what the teacher said. Well, young people, there is almost nothing left for you to graduate, so I hope you think very carefully about what school you will go to. Do not forget that you are the future of the Society of Heroes, said the professor with encouragement and with a big smile while he extended his hands, stretching them with his quirk. All of Izuku's other teammates screamed in excitement at this, and each was manifesting their quirk minus Katsuki. It's fair to say how ridiculous some quirks were. Stretching their neck or nose isn't a good quirk, and they would still make fun of someone who can't do it like a mucosai. What idiots. Don't put me in the same bag as all these extras. I'll be the one who will be the #1 hero surpassing All Might, exclaimed Katsuki with strength, confidence, and pride as he leaned with one foot on his post. The others only started complaining to him about the fact that he called them extras. Calm down once and for all, Bakugo. I remember that you plan to enter Yui, right? Said the professor calmly as he looked at Katsuki. The ash blonde smiled defiantly at this and clenched his fist determinedly. I think it's excellent that you sign up for the best school in Japan, but you're not the only one, are you? Midoriya also wants to enter Yui, the teacher continued calmly, and then turned to look at the green-haired man who, as always, remained quiet and serene at his post while he read. The professor remembers that on more than one occasion, when he saw Izuku reading, he would hit him to attract his attention, but always the green-haired man ended up holding his hand tightly. Now he remembered not to mess with the green-haired boy. Everyone in the class fell silent because they were no longer brave enough to make fun of the intimidating green-haired man who proved to be someone to be wary of. Bakugo just glared at Izuku angrily upon hearing that his rival wanted to go to the same school as him. Cursed Deku, how dare you even think that you can enroll in the same school as me? Katsuki exclaimed with rage as he made small explosions come out of the palms of his hands. The green-haired man ignored this and continued calmly reading his notes. It's not like the blonde was worth his time to answer him, though surely something the troublemaker would do. Don't you dare ignore me, my damn nerd, exclaimed Bakugo in annoyance and fury as he walked over to the green-haired man's seat to punch him. The green-haired man calmly dodged the blow without getting up from his seat and then grabbed Katsuki's wrist and then placed it on his back, preventing the blonde from moving because of the pain and because he would possibly lose his arm if he did. Everyone, including the professor, was silent and stunned by the scene. In a matter of seconds, the green-haired man subdued the blonde explosive with complete ease. Izuku just sighed at this and then let go of Katsuki, who rubbed his wrist in pain. Hasn't it been clear to you in all this time that I'm not someone who scares you anymore? Just give up on the fact of intimidating me and don't bother me. I have better things to do than waste time with the one who was once my best friend, said the green-haired man calmly while he looked sideways at the ashy blonde, who was furious at the embarrassment that the green-haired man put him through, but for now he wouldn't do anything because something inside him told him that it was better to get away from Izuku. On the streets on the way to Izuku's house. Now Izuku was returning home normally. It should be said that now Izuku always had a bored or carefree expression. There was nothing to disturb him or make him lose his composure. He was currently going through a tunnel while he had it in his mind to order a pizza after training. An unfortunate boy, said a muddy life form that came out of a sewer with happiness and malice. Then when he came out completely, it was evident that he was a villain with the quirk transforming into mud. He only went after Izuku to get his body, but I don't expect that. Hiiiuum. Izuku quickly turned to look at the villain with truly intimidating and spooky eyes as he held his hand outstretched in his direction. It seemed that in a split second he encased the villain in a transparent blue cube that was as big as the villain. That was one of the quirks that Izuku had called Perfect Cube, which allowed him to create cubes of different sizes made of energy that were very resistant and useful for enclosing living beings. Its size could be controlled at will, but the farther away it is from its creator, the less resistant it will be and its duration can vary. What the fuck? Exclaimed the mud villain with confusion and panic as he saw the bucket that had him locked up. He then realized that eventually the size of the cube decreases, making the size of the villain as well until it was finally the size of a football. You didn't expect this unfortunate boy to do this to you, did you? Said Izuku with a slight smile as he watched the mud villain carefree, who was inside the bucket unable to move or put up any resistance while staring angrily at the green-haired man. You damn brat, get me out of here, demanded the villain, very irritated and furious. A few moments ago he was escaping from a very dangerous hero, and when he tries to camouflage himself using the body of a passerby he ends up that way. You don't really believe I'm going to obey scum like you, do you? Izuku said with a faint smirk as he picked up the bucket where the villain was. Looks like someone else has arrived, the green-haired man said calmly as he put the bucket on his back and watched that the number 1 hero, All Might, was approaching, seeming to be looking for something. The man was tall with tan skin, very muscular and large. He has blonde hair with 2 large antennae of hair fully raised. He was wearing a white t-shirt and brown jeans. He had a shopping bag in one hand and had a big bright white smile on his face. His eyes were almost invisible because of their prominent sockets. "Hello young lady, haven't you happened to see a mud villain?" The peace symbol asked with a big smile on his face as he stopped in front of Izuku to smile at him. "Hello All Might, I've certainly seen one," the green-haired man replied serenely while he had a small serene smile on his face. As much as he admired the symbol of peace for as long as he can remember, that fanaticism calmed down and he could stay calm without problems being in front of his favorite hero. "Really? Where is he?" asked All Might intriguingly while still having that big smile on his face. To clarify, it should be noted that All Might always has a smile and will be emphasized the moment when he does not have one. "Right here," Izuku replied serenely as he showed the blue cube with the villain inside. This shocked and surprised the blonde and frightened the villain as he found himself in front of the hero he was fleeing from. "But what? How did you manage to lock him up by yourself, young man?" asked the symbol of peace, very surprised and excited to see that the villain he was chasing was stopped by a high school student who looked about 17 years old by his physique. "It was nothing. The point is that he's not free, so I locked him up with my quirk," replied the green-haired man in a simple and calm way while with one hand he shrugged off the matter. "And thank you very much young man, I'm sorry I'll be involved in my fights," said All Might a little surprised but still very grateful to the young green-haired man who prevented the villain from going free. "Don't worry All Might, by the way, the cube will disappear at any moment if it's too far away from me, so you won't have another container to take it away," asked Izuku with serenity and a slight smile as he watched as the peace symbol touched the cube that he created with curiosity. "I've got a bottle here," replied All Might happily as he took a large bottle of soda from his trousers. The green-haired man only nodded, indicating that it could work. Then the blonde drank the whole bottle as if it were a glass of water, leaving it completely empty. He then proceeded to put the villain in the container. "You've been very helpful, young man," said the blonde intriguingly after locking the villain in the soda bottle. Izuku Midoriya," replied the green-haired man simply and nonchalantly. "Well, thank you very much, young Midoriya. Do you want an autograph?" asked hero number 1 while from a pocket he took out an autograph pen that he always had at hand. "If it's not a nuisance," replied the green-haired man calmly as he pulled out the 13th volume of his notes on heroes. "It was interesting to write down the other heroes' quirks and their characteristics even if I never planned to steal them." "Then thank you again young Midoriya, goodbye," the hero said happily as he walked out of the tunnel while raising his hand saying goodbye to Izuku. "Wait All Might, I have a question to ask you," said the green-haired man as he walked in the direction of the hero to stop him. There he could see that All Might coughed up some blood that fell on the pavement, which worried Izuku about the hero's condition. "I'm sorry young Midoriya, I don't have time to talk to you anymore," said All Might nervously and without taking off his smile as he quickly exited the tunnel and then gained momentum and jumped hard, shooting through the sky as if he were flying. Hero number 1 had already relaxed as he soared through the sky, but when he looks to his left side he can see how young Izuku was lying next to him looking up while he was flying completely carefree. "But what the heck?" the peace symbol asked, completely surprised to see the young man flying. All Might moved very sharply and felt as if something had fallen off, but he didn't think anything of it because of the surprise the green-haired man gave him. Was the thought the hero had in his head. "I'm sorry if I'm bothering you a lot, but my question is very important to me so we can land there," Izuku said calmly as he slowly pointed to the roof of a building. The symbol of peace, tired, had no choice but to give in and listen to the green-haired boy because if he flew he would not be able to get away easily. On the rooftop, the number 1 hero went to the roof and Izuku followed him nonchalantly. Once the two were on the roof the blonde had the need to ask Izuku something that the green-haired man evidently had planned. "How come you could fly if you already have a young Midoriya quirk?" the hero asked intriguingly as he leaned against the rooftop railings watching the green-haired man. "Well, it's a bit complicated to explain but first can I ask you my question?" said Izuku calmly as he rubbed the back of his head calmly. The hero nodded and then looked calmly at the boy. "Have you been able to save everyone without anyone dying?" asked the green-haired man with a serious look focused on the hero, to which the blonde gave a serious expression while still smiling. "I mean, if you've been able to save every person if you've set your mind to it, you're the number 1 hero in the world and I guess nothing is too difficult for you. Surely you've been able to save everyone who needed your help," Izuku said with serenity and a hopeful look as he saw his favorite hero, who remained silent thinking about what to say to the green-haired man, if the truth or just to hope him with a little lie. "For example, if I hadn't been attentive, that mud villain would have submitted me, but you were still nearby and could have helped me," said the green-haired man while looking in another direction with a slight smile thinking about that hypothetical case. It was not very difficult to get the idea that the best hero can save them all if he sets his mind to it. "That's impossible even for me," All Might replied seriously, causing the green-haired man to look at him somewhat surprised. The green-haired man didn't expect that answer at all. No matter how strong I am, there will always be someone who needs my help, and it is not in my power to save them. I am not a god who is everywhere to help everyone. The only thing I can do is save as many people as I can during a dangerous situation," the blonde replied seriously, and with his gaze fixed on the young man while his big smile decreased his level a little. "But don't you think there's a way to save them all?" asked the young man again, a little surprised by the answer of hero number 1. The truth was understandable, but he was still not satisfied with that answer. "If you can find that way, tell me," replied All Might with a renewed smile and a thumbs up, which caused the green-haired man to be determined to discover such a method, so he smiled serenely. "You can count on that all," the green-haired man said with a calm smile and a serene, slightly defiant look as he clenched his fist until it was suddenly interrupted. "Puggh. Hero number 1 had spat out a large amount of blood from his mouth, and then a large amount of smoke came out of his skin so that it covered him for a few seconds. After that time, a draft cleared the smoke so that a blonde man could be seen who was too thin, with very long hair and 2 long strands that descended the sides of his face. He was about half as small as All Might, while his facial features were haggard and his eye sockets were so prominent that you couldn't see his eyeballs at all, only highlighting 2 bright blue dots that could be his eyes. But what the hell would happen to All Might? Izuku asked, a little excited and surprised, as he looked confused and intrigued at the skeletal man in front of him. "This is my true form, young Midoriya. I am all Puggh," replied the man, identifying himself as All Might before finally spitting out an insane amount of blood again. "This is unbelievable. Can you explain this to me, please?" the green-haired man asked with a calm expression as he sat on the ground. He wanted to know why the muscular hero ended up in such an emaciated state. "It's very young Midoriya, but you must never tell anyone, do you understand?" said All Might tiredly as he sat with his back to the railings of the roof. Then the hero proceeded to explain the reason for his condition, showed the green-haired man his wound, and told him that many years ago he fought against the strongest enemy of his entire hero career and how they both ended up in a state close to death. He also told her about the numerous operations he underwent to keep himself in his muscular state for at least 3 hours a day. "That happened, said the green-haired man with a certain nonchalant air when he guessed what that strong enemy would be that he fought against All Might to leave him in that state, although it was still a theory. He was amused by how small the world is. "I don't see the fun of you, young Midoriya," said the blonde seriously as he stood up again. "Something amused me, but the truth is that your situation is very serious." The green-haired man defended himself as he stood with a serene gaze fixed on the deteriorated hero number 1. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't say anything," said the blonde calmly as he offered a handshake to the green-haired man as a sign of confidence and faith that he would keep quiet. "It's okay, don't worry, it would be a real problem if this gets out," the green-haired man replied calmly as he responded to the hero's handshake. "Then tell me exactly what your quirk is," All Might asked with interest and curiosity as he looked expectantly at the young green-haired man who had yet to explain his quirk. "Well, my quirk is boom," Izuku said nonchalantly, and then was interrupted by a loud explosion that startled him and All Might. "Where did that come from?" All Might asked, startled and worried about the origin of the explosion. When they both look at the source of the sound, they see that a large amount of smoke is coming out of an area as if there were a fire. "It seems to come from the center, let's go," Izuku replied seriously as he bent down a little, indicating the blonde to climb on his back, to which the hero with a bit of embarrassment for depending on a young man agrees. In the downtown area, at the site of the origin of the explosion, it is seen that there are several heroes evacuating civilians from buildings and debris caused by a villain. That was the mud villain that Izuku had captured, but that All Might dropped during the air. The villain locked in the bottle fell into an alley where by pure chance Bakugo was passing by with his friends. The grumpy blonde kicked the bottle without noticing the villain and accidentally released him. Now he had captured Katsuki and tried to control him so that he would produce several explosions that made the hero's job even more complicated. A large number of people watched the scene from a safe distance while worrying about the well-being and safety of Katsuki, who put up a lot of resistance and struggled, creating several explosions trying to get rid of the villain, failing miserably. Being taken hostage limited the heroes when it came to defeating the villain. "Somebody help that boy," shouted a worried civilian. "We can't beat him, we need a hero with a favorable quirk to come," exclaimed angrily and irritated a hero who felt useless at not being able to save the boy. "Let's just help the civilians for now," said another hero in firefighter gear as he put out the fire in one of the buildings with his quirk. "Haha, this brat has a good quirk," exclaimed the mud villain with euphoria and malice as he proudly watched all the destruction he caused thanks to Bakugo's destructive quirk. "Damned," exclaimed Bakugo furiously as he tried to free himself from the mud villain's grip, but it was completely useless because the mud had him in his arms, legs, torso, and part of his face. "Look, it's Mount Lady," exclaimed a hopeful girl as she pointed to the great giant heroine who was arriving on the scene. "And I can't pass. I need at least 2 lanes to be able to intervene," said the great blonde heroine, unable to pass through the narrow street, which made her feel bad for not even being able to help in that situation. "Shit, if All Might were here," muttered a hero in ninja garb but with wooden parts, who with his branches from his arms lifted the rubble so that civilians could get to safety. Izuku and All Might in their skeletal state had already arrived on the scene and were trying to see what was going on, but the crowd of people and smoke prevented them from doing so. All Might glued himself to a lamppost and could see how the mud villain he was supposed to be holding captive was subduing a blonde student and causing all that destruction. When did I drop it? All Might wondered in surprise, only to assume that he dropped it when he was surprised to see Izuku flying. Thinking about it, he felt guilty and put his hand on the wound near his heart, squeezing it, wanting to return to his muscular form in order to solve the situation. "Somebody, please help him," exclaimed an elderly woman, very upset at the scene. "Call All Might, he'll surely save you," shouted an ordinary civilian as he watched furiously as no hero could do anything to help the boy. "Stop that villain at once," cried another civilian, intent on cheering the heroes, but they couldn't do much when the villain used the blonde as a shield. This civilian and some cameramen were recording the scene in great detail. Was the thought that the number one hero had in his mind as he watched as neither the heroes of the area nor he himself could do anything to help the blonde who was being taken hostage. He had already reached his limit of 3 hours per day, so it was impossible for him to save Katsuki. "Hell, who's the boy who?" asked Izuku, worried about the possible victim who was being subdued by the mud villain, but he didn't finish the question when he saw that it was Katsuki's bully who was being held captive. Thought the green-haired man with seriousness and a little annoyance, and then began to make his way through the crowd, releasing an intimidating aura with his presence. The civilians felt the imposing presence of the tall green-haired man and left the way free to the area. The heroes were about to stop the boy who was not allowed to intervene, but he looked at them seriously, stopping them. It was as if with his eyes he told them that he was the only one who could do something. If they could not do anything, they should not arrest the people who could help. For now they should only limit themselves to protecting civilians and keeping the fire situation under control. Mount Lady, who was on the other side of the street, could see how the green-haired man approached the mud villain with seriousness and tranquility. Worried, she was about to shout at him to get to safety, but before she saw how the green-haired man turned to look at her with a penetrating and confident look while smiling at him, which disconcerted and slightly blushed the heroine. "Get ready, you fucking villain," Izuku said with a cold, serious look as he left his backpack on the side of the street and took off his high school jacket, leaving only the white shirt that highlighted his work torso. "You again. You won't be able to lock me up with this boy here," exclaimed the mud villain with an air of grandeur and complete confidence as he squeezed the blonde even harder, making it difficult for him to breathe. "We'll see," said the green-haired man with a piercing look and a defiant smile, then ran in the direction of the villain. "Die," the villain exclaimed with a lot of fury and a proud smile as he directed several tentacles of mud to attack the green-haired man. But the young man calmly dodged them by passing over them or simply slipping on the ground, but at no time did he remove his defiant expression from his face. "FLUSSHH. Very slow sewer breath," Izuku said calmly while dodging the tentacles touched them lightly, freezing them instantly, which greatly surprised the villain, the heroes, the civilians, and All Might. "Crick, crack, CROSHH. What?" exclaimed the villain, very shocked and startled to see that his tentacles froze and then cracked little by little and then broke, separating from him, thought the villain, creating more mud to recompose his tentacles. Izuku smoothly reached the villain's chest where Katsuki was completely still. The reason is because he was perplexed to see how the green-haired man presented a quirk by freezing the tentacles, were the blonde's thoughts. "Don't activate your quirk no matter what, or you'll pay dearly," the green-haired man said earnestly as he looked at Bakugo with a look of terror. Bakugo didn't respond due to the mud tentacles preventing him from doing so and only saw the green-haired man surprised. "You won't be able to get him out, haha," said and laughed the villain with a victorious smile, waiting for the green-haired man to try to get the blonde out. It would be impossible for him to free him from the dense mud that held Katsuki prisoner with only muscle. "Just shut up," the green-haired man muttered earnestly, then clapped his hands a little loudly, creating a sharp sphere of air around him and Katsuki, causing the sphere of air to cut through the mud that held Bakugo prisoner and free him. Then Izuku grabbed Bakugo by the shirt and threw him hard at a hero to catch him and get him to safety, then only backed up a few feet to see the villain with a proud and satisfied smile. This is where a new wave of questions and surprises comes for everyone who witnesses the battle. The green-haired man was presenting another quirk to the one to freeze. The most surprised were Katsuki and All Might. The number one hero has been able to tell so far that Izuku had 4 quirks, which was completely surprising but still not impossible because he knew an enemy with that same particularity. Bakugo, on the other hand, was completely stunned and in shock. The green-haired man who always bothered as a child was presenting 2 quirks. It is as if he was being the victim of the worst prank of his life. All along he had that air of superiority for having a flashy quirk, but now noticed that the green-haired man had 2 useful and potentially dangerous quirks. "Brat, son of a bitch," exclaimed the mud villain with rage, fury, hatred, and strength as he regenerated the area that was cut by Izuku's sphere of wind. The green-haired man, upon hearing the insult of the villain, completely changed his expression. Now he had a sadistic and malicious look, a disturbing and frightening smile, and positioned himself in a more intimidating and imposing way, coming to frighten several around him, but especially the villain. "How? I think you lost your tongue, you bastard," Izuku said slowly and clearly, frightening the villain even more. Then he started walking, approaching the big ball of mud that insulted his mother while cracking his fingers. "And what are you going to do, eh? You're just a big bastard, son of a bitch," said the villain nervously while he watched with panic and fear as the young man approached him and then was interrupted by the green hair. "Just shut your mouth," exclaimed Izuku with rage and a murderous look as in the blink of an eye he appeared in front of the villain to charge his right fist hard and then hit the villain all over the center of the face. FLUUUSHHH, causing an immense amount of air pressure to shoot out in that direction, thus dissolving and dispersing the villain throughout the street. The blow caused so much air that it protected civilians from flying away. The pressure was such that it caused clouds in the sky to swirl and create a sudden drizzle. Everyone was completely dumbfounded at the power of the green hair. It was completely amazing how easy it was for him to deal with the troublesome villain. All might watch the scene in amazement due to the fact that the green-haired man's punch closely resembled his attacks like a Texas smash. Wow, with a fist he caused it to start raining, said a reporter who arrived at the scene while ordering the filming of the green-haired man, who stood in the middle of the street in epic fashion in the rain as he calmly watched as the rain put out the fire of the fire. It was remarkable the fact that several of the girls in the area and Mount Lady watched attentively how the body of the green-haired man was visible because of his completely wet white shirt, so that several of them had a blush on their faces. You saw him. That guy apparently has several quirks, said a civilian with emotion, emphasizing the fact that he presented 3 quirks, the one with ice, the one with the air sphere, and finally the one with super strength that created that immense amount of air pressure. Everyone assumed it was super strength because All Might did the same thing. Hey look, he's doing something, exclaimed another civilian as he took aim at the green-haired man. Everyone could see how Izuku extended his hand to where the remains of the villain were to attract each part of the mud. Each part came together again, showing the villain still in his mud form but completely unconscious. Now everyone was surprised again seeing that he apparently used a telekinesis quirk to lure the villain. Now you're definitely going to jail, but not before, said the green-haired man with a serene expression as he watched the villain faint and then brought his right hand closer to where the mud being's forehead should go. He then caused his hand to feel a sensation of heat as the mud began to fade and disappear, and after a few seconds revealed an obese and completely bald man who was passed out on the ground, indicating that he was the mud villain in his human form. What? The villain is transformed, exclaimed a hero with surprise and astonishment because no one had ever seen a quirk that allows you to nullify others. What no one there knew is that Izuku didn't transform him, but took away his quirk so that he could never use it again for evil. That kid is amazing, a reporter said enthusiastically, then began a wave of applause from the civilians who were present at the scene. All Might thought happily as he watched Izuku pick up his jacket and bag completely wet. The green-haired man sighed, tired and annoyed, though it was fortunate that his bag was waterproof because he had his volumes of heroes' notes in there. A few hours later, the reporters, after the area was secured by the heroes, went directly to Izuku to interview him and flood him with questions as to why he has so many quirks. The uninterested green-haired man walked away, but not before winking coquettishly at Mount Lady, causing her to blush. The large number of people who became fans of the green-haired man did not let him leave, so he calmly began to fly to leave the scene while the heroes allowed him to help on this occasion. Reporters and cameramen took advantage and recorded the green-haired man to spread the news of the heroic green-haired savior. All Might, on the other hand, left the scene with intentions of talking to the green-haired man. Now Izuku was walking calmly in the direction of his house while on his shoulder was his wet jacket and some buttons of his white shirt were unbuttoned so that it would not be too uncomfortable. "IDKU," cried Bakugo loudly from behind the green-haired man. The blonde had his hands in his pockets and gritted his teeth furiously. After all, the heroes treated him as if he were a little kid who fell off a bike just because he was held hostage by a villain. "What do you want, Kaken?" Izuku replied with annoyance without turning to look at the temperamental and explosive blonde, which irritated Katsuki even more. "How come you have several quirks? You fooled me all this time, damn," asked the blonde with annoyance while he took a hand out of his pockets to create explosions in it, trying to intimidate the green hair, which logically did not work. "Do you care, as if I had the duty to tell you everything," said the green-haired man calmly, as he turned his gaze a little to look sideways and indifferently at Bakugo, who gritted his teeth furiously. "If I present a quirk or two, it's not your problem. I'm not the same one you used to intimidate anymore, so adapt to this reality," he said with seriousness and an intense look as he turned completely around to look into the eyes of the one who was once his best friend. "I'm not the same," Izuku continued with seriousness and a look full of conviction and determination to make clear that fact that made him feel like someone who is capable of expressing himself, someone who is capable of taking care of himself and others. "I'm better," the green-haired man concluded with an intense and captivating gaze as a light breeze passed through moving his green hair and some pink petals fell from the sakura trees. Quite simply, Bakugo, as hard as it is for him to accept this idea, was taken aback when he saw the epic moment that his rival and former best friend had just starred in. "I want you to know that I didn't ask you for help, did you understand, bastard?" Bakugo exclaimed with a little anger as he had almost no words to contradict the green-haired man who had certainly thrown him off balance with his words and his attitude full of conviction. "I hope you get into Yui so I can crush you in front of everyone," exclaimed the ashy blonde loudly as he looked at his rival with a sadistic smile that was characteristic of Bakugo trying to regain his self-confidence. "Yes, of course, I only saved you because I wanted to, so don't worry. Besides, I will enter Yui, but try to refrain from bothering me there," replied the green-haired man with simplicity and disinterest while with his hands he downplayed the matter. Then Katsuki put his hands in his pockets and headed home, but not before telling Izuku. Now you might be a good challenge, Katsuki said quietly as he looked at the ground, remembering the time Izuku protected a boy from him and his friends, who were abusing the boy with their quirks. At that moment, Izuku couldn't stop him because he didn't have a quirk, but perhaps now he would fulfill his unwitting role as a rival in a better way. The green-haired man didn't think much of it, so he was about to continue on his way when he saw that Kakin disappeared from his sight, but out of nowhere he heard loud footsteps of someone running in his direction. "Wait, I'm here, young Midoriya," exclaimed All Might in his muscular form and with a big smile coming at high speed in front of the green hair. "All Might, what are you doing here?" Izuku asked with a bit of intrigue to the symbol of peace, whom he honestly did not expect to see again. Puagh. All Might began to speak, but then he coughed up blood again and returned to his skeletal form, which no longer seemed strange to the green-haired man once he got used to the idea that it would happen often. "I have something important to tell you, young Midoriya," said the emaciated hero calmly as he wiped a trickle of blood from his chin. "I realize that you have what it takes to be a great hero. While the other pro-heroes couldn't do anything, you without hesitation went to save the boy," said All Might with a slight smile as his skeletal face allowed. "I don't think you should give me so much praise. I just acted on instinct, and it just so happened that I could beat the villain. Any powerful hero could have done that," Izuku replied with serenity and a slightly cheerful smile at being praised by hero number one. "There you are wrong, young man. There are several stories of great professional heroes who say that the first time their bodies acted alone. And I include myself among them," replied All Might with enthusiasm and excitement while pointing his thumb at her. "I'm flattered by what you tell me, All Might, but what do you want to get at?" asked the green-haired man calmly and a little curiously as he looked into the hero's eyes. Although he didn't really see a big deal in him, he would definitely do that for anyone he sees in danger even if he doesn't like them very much. It's just that when he sees someone at risk, he simply acts thinking that the people with his eyes are asking for help. "What I mean is that I saw in you someone who will undoubtedly save people selflessly and heroically. Therefore I ask you today if you want to be the successor of my power," proposed All Might in an inspiring and emotional way while watching the green hair. From behind a breeze moved the hero's blonde hair, giving a sentimental touch to the scene. "Successor to your power?" asked Izuku curiously and intrigued at the words spoken by his favorite hero. If I had told him this a year ago, he would no doubt cry when he heard that someone besides his mother believed in him, but he had matured a lot mentally since then, but that didn't mean he wasn't moved by what his idol told him. "Yes, the quirk I have isn't mine originally. It's called One for All and it can be passed on to a successor and accumulate strength every generation. I realize that you are worthy to obtain it, so I offer you to acquire this power," explained the number one hero in an epic and inspiring way while clenching his fist, and from it came a few flashes of light as representing the accumulation of power in each generation of One for All wielders. Izuku, upon hearing the explanation of the One for All, remembered several things, the first being that what was happening closely resembles how he gained his power a year ago. The man in a suit he named All for One took notice of him and offered him his quirk, and now his favorite hero has taken an interest in him and is offering him to be the next One for All wearer. It would be an offense to accept All for One from the man who killed his mother and not receive One for All from the hero who symbolizes peace and heroism in society. "I gladly accept, All Might. What do I have to do to get the One for All?" said the green-haired man excitedly while smiling at All Might with emotion and a mature look, which cheered and relieved the symbol of peace that had been looking for someone with the boy's virtues to be his successor. "You must eat my hair," said the blond man, transforming into his muscular form and pulling a single hair from one of his antennae. "What?" asked Izuku dryly and completely confused, leaving with an expression of WTF. And then a dead silence forms and a dry desert bush rolls down the street like in Western movies. "You heard it right. You have to digest my DNA so that you inherit my quirk, and just because I allow it, I'm giving it to you, so it doesn't matter how someone gets your DNA. If you don't want it, no one will take the One for All," explained All Might with a big smile while a circle is shown above him that in a simple way shows the explanation of All Might with Chibi's figures of him, of Izuku, and some villain who wants to steal the One for All. "I see, but there's no painful repercussions or anything, right?" Izuku asked cautiously, remembering the amount of pain he felt when All for One gave him his quirk and the constant nightmares that plagued him for weeks. "There would be if your body wasn't prepared to use it, but because you have the same physical build as I did when I was your age, you won't have any problems," replied the number one hero with a big smile as he gave the green-haired man a thumbs up as a sign that there would be no problem. "It is okay. Here I come," Izuku said a little unsure, and then ate the blonde hair that All Might gave him. Needless to say, how disgusting it is to eat a hair, plus it wasn't his, but let's just say that All Might's silky hair tasted like lemon to alleviate the green-haired man's displeasure a bit. "And that's it?" asked Izuku, intrigued after having eaten the hair of the peace symbol. "It's not like it's a huge accomplishment, nor would I say it proudly in public, but still, what's important is what would come after I've done that." "That's all," replied the hero simply and simply. "I don't feel different or anything," said the green-haired man, trying to sense or perceive something different about him, or would All Might turn to dust so that he could feel the difference. Izuku was frightened at the thought of such a possible scene and that the greatest hero would die because of him. "Don't be impatient, young Midoriya. You have to wait until your digestive system assimilates it. explained the blonde with a strong pat on Izuku's back, trying to lighten the atmosphere and then laugh a little loudly. That's weird. That didn't happen to me with the other guy, Izuku muttered thoughtfully as he had a hand on his chin and stared at the floor. What other subject? Asked All Might as he listened to the green-haired man. He was curious who that other subject was and how it related to what was happening. Oh, that's right, I forgot to tell you about my quirk, Izuku said, remembering that small detail as he bumped his fist against the palm of his other hand, indicating that he remembered it. This comment also caused All Might to remember that the green-haired man couldn't explain to him because of the explosion that alerted them on the rooftop. You see, the enemy who gave you that wound is all for one, right? Izuku said with a slight smile and a calm look as he saw the tall blonde hero who was startled when he heard that name. What? How do you know? Asked loud and muscular hero, completely startled and surprised to hear that name that has brought so many misfortunes to him. That's because a year ago, the day my mother died at the hands of him, he came into my house and gave me the quirk all for one, so now I can remove, make mine, combine and give quirks at will. The green-haired man replied with a slight smile while his eyes showed a bit of sadness as he remembered that day, something that was not overlooked by the hero who felt grief for the loss of the green-haired man's mother. This is unbelievable. Don't ever expect that damn to be able to hand over his quirk. Wait a minute, young Midoriya, said All Might surprised and then thought a little and exclaimed, calling Izuku's attention. What happened to him? Asked the peace symbol with a serious look and with his characteristic cheerful expression replaced by a frown and serious as he brought his face closer to the green-haired man's for him to answer. He did not do it to intimidate, but it was pure instinct and intrigue. I killed him, replied the green-haired man simply and calmly, unfazed by All Might's approach. What? All Might asked excitedly at Izuku's shocking answer. You see, he gave me all for one through the touch of our hands. The process hurt more than you could imagine, so I panicked because I thought I would die and I accidentally stabbed him with my arm in this way. Izuku explained calmly and serenely and then transformed his right arm into a metal edge that would easily cut a lamppost or a steel beam. The number one hero couldn't believe what he was hearing. The man nicknamed All for One who murdered his predecessor and inflicted that limiting wound on him was dead, and died at the hands of the young man to whom he decided to leave his power. Is he dead, then? Asked All Might, intrigued, wanting to confirm again what the young man had said. Very dead. His corpse turned to dust and all, replied the green-haired man again, as he looked serenely at All Might and omitted the fact that the smoke had been consumed by him and that he had suffered several nightmares that seemed to be fragments of the subject's life. He omitted this because it would worry the peace symbol. All Might, upon hearing it, smiled again, but with more joy, while mentally he had a party celebrating the death of the bastard who had him in that skeletal state. This is unprecedented. The strongest enemy no longer exists. And not only that, said All Might happily while turning his back on Izuku and then making a small silence, leaving the green-haired man expectant. Now you have all for one and one for all, you have the two opposite quirks, he exclaimed with emotion and a dazzling smile, turning to look at Izuku while you can imagine that behind him comes confetti, streamers, a few explosions and jets flying through the sky leaving trails of blue smoke in their wake, white and red in pure American style. I also think it's incredible. Believe me that with these two powers I'll be able to save them all by overcoming my own limits. If someone is far from my reach, then I'll increase that scope even more so that no one dies, said the green-haired man with seriousness and a slight smile as he sees his two hands and then turns them into fists full of determination, as indicating that one is all for one and the other is one for all, and that both quirks that were granted to him are going to be used for good. I believe with every fiber of me being in that young Midoriya. From now on you will train with me to train one for all and prepare to join you. So I hope you give your best effort, All Might said in an inspiring and excited way as he placed a hand on Izuku's back, encouraging him. Sure, I'll give a plus ultra at all times, said the green-haired man with a slight smile and a calm look while guessing the reaction All Might would have when he said plus ultra. H-A-H-A-H-A, that's the attitude. Laughed, exclaimed the peace symbol as he patted the green-haired man the back, which hurt a bit because he wasn't controlling his strength while in his muscular form. I think I should go, All Might, said the green-haired man, seeing the time and realizing that it was already getting dark. Who are you living with? Asked All Might, intrigued. According to what the green-haired man had told him, his mother died a year ago because of All for One, so he was curious. My dad died many years ago and my mother also died a year ago, as I told you before, so I train at home and live alone, Izuku replied with serenity and a slight smile hiding the regret he felt when he said that. I'm sorry about that, said the peace symbol sadly, then returned to his skeletal form and spat out more blood. The expenditure of energy he had made all day was excessive. He transformed to find the mud monster and transformed on the rooftop. Then he reverts to his muscular form to reach the green-haired young man, and then he returns to his skeletal form. Then with the hair thing he returned to his muscular and smiling form, and just now he returned to his emaciated form again. The strange thing is that he had already passed his limit of 3 hours a day and had been transformed into his muscular form for several minutes while talking to the green-haired man. Although he remembered during the attack of the mud villain he could not transform, could it be that the psychological factor was influencing when he transformed? It could be, although the truth didn't matter if everything turned out well in the end. Don't worry about that, All Might. I made it a point to live my life for my mother to prevent other people from losing someone important. replied the green-haired man with a friendly smile, and then walked towards his destination with his wet vest on one shoulder and his waterproof backpack hanging from the other. Thought the number one hero and symbol of peace as he watched with a big smile as the green-haired man walked away. Without a doubt, with those two quirks and with his good intentions, spirit, and determination, he would prove to everyone that he is a great hero who would surely surpass him one day. At Bakugo's house, after talking to All Might, Izuku headed towards Bakugo's house but not exactly to talk to Katsuki. He walked over to the door and rang the bell and then waited a few seconds for someone to open the door. "Hi Izuku, how are you?" said a female voice with a kind smile and a cheerful look as he opened the door wide. She was Mitsuki Bakugo, Katsuki's maiden mom, who has short, uneven, and messy ashy blonde hair. Her eyes are slanted but still large. She wears a simple blouse that highlights her statuesque body, and over it she wears a sweater. She also wears a tight skirt that highlights her buttocks and wears simple dark sneakers. She is 1 meter 70 centimeters tall and is 37 years old. But she still looks very young, and her great attributes and beauty only attribute to that. "Excellent, Mitsuki, you heard about Kaken today, didn't you?" replied the green-haired man with a mischievous smile and a serene look as he looked intently at the beautiful woman's entire body. "Yes, I saw it on TV where they also showed you. I thank you for saving him, Izuku," Mitsuki said with a slight mischievous smile and a look focused on the strong torso of the green-haired man that was highlighted by his wet white shirt. "Well, you know, I think I want compensation for all the effort today," Izuku said in a more seductive tone of voice as he slowly approached Mitsuki. He was also thanking whatever God is helping him due to Katsuki's father having died of an illness 13 years ago, so even though he grieved the loss, he couldn't help but think that the beautiful mother was available at any time. Although no one has seen it and won't see it, it's just that a black-haired man with red locks was giving the green-haired man a thumbs up as if to say you're welcome. "What kind of compensation?" asked Mitsuki in a provocative tone of voice, knowing what the young green-haired man meant. "You know what I mean, Kaken isn't at home, is he?" said Izuku with a dominant smile while as he approached just a few centimeters from Mitsuki and with his left hand he possessed her buttocks, causing her to only stifle a moan slightly with a smile. He went with his aunt and uncle because they wanted to check that he's okay," Mitsuki replied with a perverted smile as she ate the provocative green-haired man with her eyes. Who smiled at this. "You're very easy to read, Mitsuki, I know you sent him there," Izuku said with a bold smile while with his other hand he squeezed a breast of the sexy and very well-endowed blonde, who couldn't help but moan. "Ah, you know me very well," she said with a flirtatious smile as she bit her lips slightly. She knew the green-haired man was coming, so she didn't want her son home for what was to come that night. The green-haired man took her from his waist, clinging her to his torso, and then kissed her passionately on the lips. Mitsuki smoothly reciprocated the kiss while wrapping both arms around the green-haired man's neck to further deepen the kiss that was with tongue. As they parted, it was visible that a little saliva was coming out of the corner of Mitsuki's lips. There was a reddish color on her cheeks, and her breathing became more agitated as a sign that she could not take the weight any longer. "Then, let's start the fun," said the green-haired man with a domineering, intense smile as he entered the house with one arm around Katsuki's mother's hip. "With pleasure," replied the sexy woman with desire in her voice and gaze, then closed the front door. The things that happened inside are best left untold because of how intense they were. But for more information, Katsuki's mom wouldn't be able to walk normally for at least a few days. Thank goodness Katsuki wasn't home because no matter where he was, he could have heard the noise Izuku and Mitsuki were making. A little more context is that about 6 months after getting the all-for-one and starting his hellish training, Izuku noticed how Katsuki's mom, who was his neighbor, began to look at him differently. So the stocky, tall, and no longer innocent green-haired man decided to make his move with his former best friend's mom. One day he entered his house and thanks to the natural charm that the green-haired man obtained, he ended up seducing Mitsuki. In this way, both have had some encounters at Izuku's house due to the fact that no one lived there but him. It should be said that their relationship was only lustful and passionate, nothing romantic or sentimental, so it was only casual sex and without commitment. Changing the subject, Izuku now had one for all in his possession, and from that day on he would train with all might to train said Quirk and prepare to enter Yui, in which in about 10 months the registration trials would begin. Now the green-haired man had the two quirks opposite each other and would give his all to make the best use of both abilities. But if there is one thing he would not pass up, it would be an occasion to have fun. Now that it's mentioned, he also set his sights and his interest on the giant heroine, who knows if at some point something would happen to her. Chapter 3, I Will Save You. After spending a very entertaining night with Bakugo's mother, the green-haired man was heading home to change his clothes to one more suitable for training. The day before, he had obtained the one for all, the quirk of the number one hero, All Might, who would be his trainer, mentor, teacher from now on. Once Izuku had put on a black sleeveless sports shirt, a gray jumpsuit, and black wristbands, he headed for a beach where he would start training with All Might. How he knew it would be there was easy. All Might told him through an email. Very old-fashioned to be honest, but the hero didn't have his phone number. But something intriguing is that he knew his address to send him the letter. Curious, isn't it? Either way, Deku had arrived at the address the letter indicated and saw a large amount of trash around him, where there should be a beach. He wondered at times if he was wrong in the direction, so he quickly began to fly a little high to confirm that it was indeed a beach that was behind all the garbage. Possibly due to people's poor sense of belonging, the garbage ended up being left in that area, and over time it became an artificial garbage dump. Once he descended to the ground, he saw how All Might was approaching in his gaunt form in a sweatshirt and a blue jumpsuit that was too big for him. "Good morning, young Midoriya," greeted All Might in good spirits as he raised his hand in greeting the green-haired man. "Good morning, All Might. I have a question for you," Izuku said calmly and with a slight smile as he watched the blonde stand in front of him calmly. "Tell me, boy," replied the symbol of peace calmly as he scratched his head and looked at his successor. "Does this pile of rubbish relate to my one-for-all training?" Izuku asked intriguedly as he pointed his thumb at the pile of rubbish behind him. "That's right, you're very intuitive, young Midoriya," All Might congratulated excitedly as he smiled at his new pupil, disciple, student. "I don't think it's hard to deduce. I don't think hero number 1 wrote the wrong address unintentionally," replied the green-haired man calmly and with a slight smile as he turned to see the large amount of trash that prevented the view of the beach. Evidently All Might had selected that place for a reason. It wasn't genius to deduce that. "Either way, your training will consist of cleaning this beach without using any all-for-one quirk," All Might explained serenely as he stood next to Izuku and also saw the large amount of trash that was proof of how unconscious many people can be. "So you want me to train my one-for-all controller while I clean, right?" Izuku asked nonchalantly and calmly as he looked up at the sky. It wasn't a bad idea to do that process, and it would also clean up the beach. "Exactly, but first I must explain to you what one-for-all grants," replied the peace symbol as he clenched a fist in front of him seriously. The green-haired man looked at him carefully because it was important to know the characteristics of this new quirk he had obtained. The one-for-all allows the user to have superhuman strength, superhuman endurance, and superhuman speed thanks to the fact that it collects power and the ability to be able to transmit it to a successor. So it is particularly aimed at close combat, although it has ways to be used at long range, All Might explained with his eyes fixed on his fist while you can imagine All Might in his muscular form performing different feats proving their point. Izuku visualized in his mind the great feats of All Might recorded on camera, in which at high speeds he avoided collapses or with the force of his fists caused the air pressure to impact an enemy at great distances of separation. So it's a quirk for close fights, isn't it? I already have several quirks like that. How big are we talking about when you say superhuman strength? Asked the green-haired man intriguingly after having a hand on his chin thoughtfully while looking at the blonde. This caused All Might to look up to the sky to think of an example to serve as a reference for Izuku. "Well, in my golden days a blow with all my power managed to completely destroy a mountain without a trace, if that's anything to say," All Might replied with a faint smile as he raised a fist as if he were posing in a gym despite being completely lacking in muscles. The green-haired man only opened his eyes, slightly surprised at the hero's answer. "It's awesome, so the first thing will be to try to activate it, right?" said Izuku calmly as he walked a few steps forward to start stretching his arms and legs a little. "It looks like you're an expert at this," All Might said with a faint smile as he folded his arms and watched the green-haired man stretch. "Well, I've had to try almost all the quirks I have one by one to train them. I can know their usefulness, but I still have to put them into practice to get used to them and perfect them," the green-haired man explained calmly as he continued to stretch. He remembered all the damage he accidentally caused when he tried a quirk. He could know its usefulness, but knowing how to control it is another thing, so he had to train them one by one with caution. Not to mention that because of this I was also forced to experience what repercussions the quirks caused on me. Even knowing their usefulness, I had to experience in my own flesh what was the limit that my body could tolerate them and when the side effects presented themselves in me. Izuku continued calmly as he lay on the floor face down to start doing push-ups, which did not prevent him from speaking as if they were not a problem. "And why is that? Don't you already know which ones you have and how to use them?" asked All Might intrigued as he looked at the boy with notable surprise. To think that this young man of only 15 years old had that capacity for analysis and mental processing was amazing. Although possibly the green-haired man would downplay it, thinking that it was not a big deal. "As I said before, I know all that, but you'll still know that it's different to see it than to feel it in your own body," the green-haired man replied serenely as he did push-ups with one hand and turned his gaze to All Might with a slight smile. "You're right, young Midoriya, I know very well what you're talking about," said the hero with a faint melancholy smile as he turned to see his right hand forming a fist. Then memories from before he got the one-for-all came to his mind, as well as the image of his predecessor teaching him said quirk. "So trying one by one I learned to what limit I can manifest them. From there I only had to train each one in order to reduce the appearance of sequelae in my body. Although currently if I try too hard I can exceed my limit and the consequences would be present," said the green-haired man calmly while he got up from the ground and then looked at the sky, remembering the incredible amount of physical and mental training he had to do to increase his control over his quirks. "And are those sequels very serious?" It would be a problem if you're in the middle of a fight and you look vulnerable, said the blonde with some concern about these sequels that will probably become a big problem for the green-haired man in difficult fights. Although in a way this risk was understandable due to how powerful All for One was already in itself. The truth is that so far I haven't had the opportunity to see how much my aftermath affects me because I have some quirks that have healing functions, so I can recover from those after effects in a certain period of time depending on their magnitude and severity, replied the green-haired man, turning to look at All Might nonchalantly and with his hands behind his head. The hero only put on a pensive face while he thought carefully about the past. So you have healing quirks, huh? That's good, but they also generate a certain tiredness in you, don't they? Asked the peace symbol, abandoning his thoughts with the intention of concentrating on the case of the green hair. The green-haired man yawned a little, stretching his arms to the sky as he internally wished to stay in Mitsuki's bed with his big breasts against his back, bringing him warmth. It was a 7 and these days the green-haired man didn't exactly get up early. UWAH, exactly. Anyway, I don't use these healing quirks much because of how infrequently I get hurt or overdo it with any of my quirks, Izuku replied, scratching his head and then jumping to wake up and get rid of the sleep he still had. UWAH, can you give me some examples about the aftermath of some of your quirks? Asked the blonde calmly after being infected by Izuku's yawn. It would be helpful to know what kind of consequences some quirks entail so that you are prepared for a defensive plan. Well, the quirk with which I created the energy cube is called Perfect Cube. With this one I can create energy cubes of different sizes and very resistant. Depending on how far these cubes are from me, their durability and resistance vary or decrease, replied the young man with green hair calmly while he stopped jumping and then cracked his fingers, arms and finally neck and then do some squats. Izuku's exercises weren't the ones he did all the time or the usual repetitions. He was just looking for some random movement to wake up completely that set at 7 a.m. When I keep a cube created for too long or if I apply more energy so that it makes it much more resistant, it can cause me a great pain in my eyes and a migraine. Izuku explained calmly as he calmly stopped doing push-ups, then just dropped into the sand looking up, taking a moment to appreciate the sunny sky in which there were almost no clouds. Why only the eyes and head are those areas where that quirk is based? Asked All Might curiously as he scratched his head with one hand while with the other he pulled up his training suit that was exaggeratedly large for being in his skinny form. Yes, anyway these pains disappear after a few minutes, but even so during that time I can't fight well, Izuku replied relaxed as he got up from the ground to only sit there watching the large crowd of garbage that prevented him from seeing a perfect view of the sea. And how tough are these cubes, young Midoriya? Yesterday's mud villain couldn't seem to get out of there at all, All Might asked with a faint smile as he waited anxiously to know the potential of said cubes. Well, these could be very useful when facing villains and would be essential if a villain with a very destructive quirk was looking to harm the people around them. The green-haired man became thoughtful with a hand on his chin as he looked up at the sky looking for exactly how to respond. It's not like he's fought someone strong enough to break one so far, so he wasn't sure what level his quirk stamina would be at. I'll explain it with an example. If you hit a bucket hard with my greatest resistance, I would surely break it with a bit of difficulty. Of course, I only speculate by comparing the videos in which you appear, so I'm not completely sure about this, the young man replied calmly while turning his gaze to his hero with a calm expression as if such a statement was not surprising. The peace symbol heard this and felt like the wonderful light bulb of ideas was going on above his head. And if we try it, there's no one around all day so we could put your theory into practice, All Might proposed with a haggard smile and then transformed into his muscular form, causing the green-haired man to smile slightly with a defiant look. Okay, I'd like to get rid of that doubt once and for all, Izuku accepted with a defiant look and an excitement inside to test his quirk's endurance against the best possible candidate, the #1 hero of all heroes. The green-haired man positioned himself seriously on the sand as he watched as All Might with his dazzling smile positioned himself in the middle of the area waiting for Izuku. The green-haired man quickly glanced intently at the blonde as he extended a hand in his direction, causing a large blue cube to surround All Might. The hero calmly touched the walls of the cube from the inside with curiosity about how its texture was. Curiously, it felt like it was porcelain of the finest and most refined but still felt very resistant. The green-haired man had his eyes fixed on the cube, reinforcing it with all his strength so that it would withstand the blow of the peace symbol as long as possible. All Might preparado asintio a Izuku para confirmar si estaba listo a lo cual recibió un asentimiento del peliver que con seriedad esperaba el ataque de su maestro. El rubio se preparó, recogió su brazo derecho para después cargarlo con fuerza y luego dirigirlo con potencia y rapidez a una de las paredes del gran cubo azul transparente. Texas smash, the hero exclaimed loudly and then slammed his fist into the wall of the cube, causing the air pressure inside to cause the wall behind All Might to be pressed down by so much power as well. The struggle on the part of the hero was evident, showing that it was more difficult for him than he thought to give way to the cube, which was cracking rapidly in the face of such an amount of power. Izuku, on the other hand, was sweating a little, while with remarkable effort he kept the blue cube as much as he could. MGGH was Izuku's groan of pain as he felt a strong pain invade his eyes and then fall victim to a migraine that caused the cube to completely give way to All Might's power. The cube broke as if it were a cement wall to then release the large amount of air pressure from All Might's blow. Seconds later the destroyed cube disappeared into thin air and All Might, sweating a little, came to see the young green-haired man who had both hands on his head trying to endure the strong pain that tortured him. "Are you very young, Midoriya?" the blonde asked with great concern while nervously trying to help the young man with his pain. But Izuku quickly settled into place, then stopped holding his head in a sign that the pain had subsided. "Of course, just leave me a few seconds and I'll be as good as new," said the green-haired man in pain while covering his eyes that also hurt with one hand while with the other he tried to calm the worried symbol of peace. It took almost 2 minutes for the green-haired man to feel good again and with renewed strength and then nod to All Might with a slight smile as a sign that he was already better, to which the blonde was relieved and smiled with a lot of emotion. "That was amazing, kid. To think that only one of your quirks could withstand a Texas smash with more than half my strength is incredible," exclaimed the blonde hero with excitement and happiness at the great potential of the green-haired quirk and his surprising ability. He had managed to hold off an attack with more than half his power very well, not to mention that the green-haired man was interrupted by pain due to the overuse of his quirk. Otherwise he would surely have lasted a little longer. "I say that the incredible thing is how absurdly strong you are. I will really have to train more to avoid this result in battle," replied the green-haired man with a slight smile directed at his master, who was really called the symbol of peace and the best hero of all. It was definitely the hardest time for him to hold a cube against an opponent's attack. Now all that's left is to train to overcome that limit so that not even All Might could break his quirk. That's the young spirit, Midoriya. Always increase your performance and surpass yourself," the blonde encouraged excitedly as he patted Izuku the back. Then he transformed and then with a smile went to a refrigerator while the green-haired man prepared to finish warming up and stretching. "Taking advantage of the fact that we were talking about your quirks, approximately how many do you have?" asked the peace symbol curiously as he sat down on a refrigerator that was overturned there. It was a question he had kept since the day before. He never knew for sure how many quirks the All-for-One user had, as he had counted at least 26 in his matches. "I can't tell you exactly. The way I see them depends on my imagination, and when I use them I select them as if they were an electronic file," Izuku said thoughtfully as he sat on the floor and then stretched, touching his toes. Ever since he got All-for-One, he would select the quirk he would use as if they were electronic files because of how familiar he was with that system. "I would say approximately 107 quirks, although there may be some that I have not yet discovered. Unfortunately, the former user of All-for-One stole a lot of quirks," Izuku replied simply as he stood up and then looked at All Might with an intrigued look. The blonde, upon hearing the number of quirks, was perplexed by the sheer sum of skills the green-haired man had at his fingertips. The green-haired man nodded calmly to move away a few meters, looked at his hands for a few seconds and then concentrated by closing his eyes. Then slowly several red and yellow-colored lines or rays seemed to glow underneath the skin of his right arm. It also seemed that an electric aura with emerald lightning began to surround his arm. The sensation was unique, as if his veins were gathering with fire in his arm to strengthen him and make him feel an incredible pressure in his limb that longed to be released. Izuku quickly and imposingly picked up his fist to gain momentum and then slammed upward into the sky with force, causing him to then smash into the sky. FLUUSSSSHHH. A great current of air flew into the sky, opening a hole in a cloud that was there without disturbing anyone. Izuku looked at this slightly surprised as he looked carefully at every detail of his arm, which he hadn't done in a while, then slowly turned off one for all and then saw his arm back to normal. He didn't have any overwhelming damage or anything very extreme. He just felt his hand like a cramp or with a simple pain that was tolerable to some extent. At the time, he recalled that All Might told him that because she had a similar build to his at his age, there would not be very painful sequelae, at least for now. "It's a little painful, but it's bearable," Izuku said earnestly as he touched his arm intently, waiting for the pain he was feeling to go away. The amount of strength he used was staggering, and I would say he was a superior to any other quirk he had. That quirk allowed him to create a series of pulses of air that could displace incredibly heavy objects as if giving him a blow. Or he could also use the quirk simply to influence the breezes in the environment, like when he caused it to rain the day before. That same quirk called Pulse is the one he used against the Mudman yesterday. Pulse allows its user to create pulses of air at will and with freedom to control their magnitude and direction. It can be used to influence the environment or as an extension of the user's body. But if used recklessly or carelessly, it can cause extensive damage to the user and be very destructive, so thorough control is required. "That was very good, young Midoriya. If you feel pain, it's because..." All Might was going to explain after encouraging the green-haired man and then being stopped by Izuku, who raised his left hand as a sign for the blonde to refrain from speaking while he looked at the blonde with serenity. "Sorry for interrupting you, All Might. Could you let me try to understand it for an hour or so, please?" asked Izuku with a slight smile as he squeezed and opened his right hand, preparing it with the one for all again as he no longer felt pain. "Why, young Midoriya?" asked All Might with intrigue and curiosity as he looked expectantly at the green-haired man, though he had a small idea that he might be what his student wanted. "It's because I always like to explore a quirk by myself. I think it's better for me to try to control it myself than to be instructed from the beginning. Plus, I could find different ways to use it," Izuku replied with a defiant and excited smile as he turned his gaze to see his fist with One for All, which was crying out to release all the energy that was accumulating. All Might was surprised by the green-haired man's words, but then he was happy to see the boy's attitude and determination to be self-taught. "You have a good point. I'll buy some energy drinks for both of you. Let's have a long day," said the peace symbol with an excited smile, and then walked in the direction of a drink machine he saw on the way. Izuku mentally thanked his master for his understanding and then slammed back in the direction of the sky with his arm with One for All, again causing a large air current that caused a faint defiant smile on Izuku. "It's been a while since I've inspected and experimented with a quirk. It would definitely be entertaining." 1 hour later, then Izuku started training on his own testing and experimenting with the One for All. It was difficult for him to understand it at first, but eventually he got an idea of how to use that quirk. He now moved with speed with his legs using the One for All on them, jumped in the air several meters off the ground, and when he fell he used his arms and legs with One for All to land safely. All Might, after about 15 minutes, had returned with the drinks. He was astonished to see the progress that the green-haired man had made in his short absence, so he sat down to watch. The green-haired man with speed gave several blows to the air, causing airwaves that, although they were less powerful than the first one, they were still impressive, adding the fact that there were now several thanks to Izuku's speed. An hour passed and Izuku rose through the air to make a vertical turn to kick to the ground, causing the air to reach the sand of the beach and thus cause a large cloud of sand. He then fell into the area and then turned off the One for All on his entire body while he was sweating a little and then felt a small tinge afterwards. "Very well, young Midoriya, I didn't expect you to make so much progress," said All Might, changing into his muscular form at times to congratulate the green-haired man's progress in just an hour of experimentation and attempts. "Phew, thank you, All Might. I realized that before I was forcing 100% in my arm to hit, but that only overloaded the power in my arm until it hurts her," Izuku said with serenity and a faint smile after sighing, relaxing as he saw his master in his muscular form. Moments later it returned to its original form so as not to waste its 3 hours a day. "So at first I thought about using smaller amounts of power in a single area when it came to hitting, but I came up with a better idea. What I did was to start regulating One for All throughout my body," explained the green-haired man while more naturally activating One for All throughout his body. Now every part of his body released that electric aura and was surrounded by the lightning of green hues. That way I don't overload an area with 100% but distribute that percentage around my entire body. Sacrificing a certain amount of strength for agility and speed, Izuku continued talking calmly and then quickly moved backwards, doing a few somersaults. He then quickly gained momentum and sprinted alongside All Might again, causing him to gradually increase his haggard smile at the green-haired man's progress in just 1 hour. "Then I thought about increasing and decreasing the energy of One for All in some areas simultaneously," said the green-haired man calmly as he kicked the One for All in the air but deactivated it in the rest of his body. He then specifically showed his right arm and left leg and then disabled the One for All in those areas while the rest of the body was still imbued with the energy, then reactivated the One for All in those areas, pleasantly surprising All Might. "This way I could use the energy from an area that I don't use to guide it to another and thus increase the damage it does at the right time," Izuku explained with a slight smile as he deactivated all the One for All in his body except in his right hand and then with his fingers charged a strong wave of air towards the sky. "FLUUSHH. So I only have to train the amount of percentage that I can control in my body just as you endure the One for All in your whole body during your 3 hours limit." The green-haired man finished speaking serenely while he felt how his right hand was the victim of numbness and his fingers hurt considerably. Then he walked over and sat on the overturned fridge right next to All Might, who was a little overwhelmed by the amount of explanation Izuku gave. The peace symbol knew all that, but on a more basic level, Bone had learned to use it, thinking that it was his own body and that he had to control the energy with every movement. It was more natural to him than to think of it as much as to distribute it all over his body, although if it was essentially the same thing, it wouldn't say anything to the green hair. "Very well, it took me about 2 weeks to understand that." All Might congratulated Izuku with excitement and a smile as he gave him his energy drink, which was no longer cold due to being exposed to the sun for approximately 45 minutes. That didn't matter to the green-haired man, though, who only used frost to cool her down again. That quirk called Frost allows the wearer to control, manipulate, and create ice at will. It also grants great resistance to low temperatures and allows the wearer to cool their body so that they can cool the environment around them. This quirk consumes a large amount of energy depending on the extent with which it is used, leaving the user with a strong feeling of hypothermia when overusing the ability. But even so, the green-haired man has managed to develop it very well to avoid fatigue problems in what would be a common or easy battle according to him. "But there's something that intrigues me about All Might," Izuku said calmly as he looked down at the floor and then took a swig of his energy drink. Then he turned to look at the blonde serenely while thinking about the mystery that had distracted him during his experiments and tests. "What is young Midoriya?" asked All Might intriguingly as he looked curiously at his green-haired student. "What is the origin of one for all and all for one?" Izuku asked seriously as he looked down again looking at the ground. All Might tensed at this question because he didn't know that he would be in the situation of revealing it so quickly. "I say this because I realized while I saw one for all in my mind, that at first a part of this quirk originally came from all for one," justified the green-haired man without looking in another direction while he lightly squeezed the bottle of his drink. The number one hero noticed this and was forced to answer the boy. "Phew, I didn't expect to have to tell you so soon, but I suppose I should have expected it from someone as curious as you," said All Might, his spirits a little low after sighing a little stressed. Izuku looked up, intrigued by the reaction of the number one hero who was always in good spirits. "What do you mean, All Might?" Izuku asked curiously as he looked intently at the blonde, who made him more intrigued by saying that he didn't want to tell it yet. Surely if the blonde didn't want to talk about it, it's because it was a complicated or painful subject. See, many years ago, when the quirks were beginning to manifest all over the world, there was a period of social collapse and agitation against those who had quirks, All Might said with his eyes fixed on the ground as he heard the sound of the ocean waves that could not be seen due to the garbage. The green-haired man nodded earnestly, listening to his master. "I know about that. We were sent to investigate it at school. People with quirks are supposed to defend themselves before the government and society, and from there the tension went down until quirks became normal in society, reaching the point of being something strange if you don't have one," Izuku said seriously as he recalled when he researched that on his computer, then remembered when he was discriminated against for being a mucosai by all his classmates in Kaken. "That is partly true, but there is something that most people do not know, and that is that during that period a man emerged in Japan and decided to take advantage of his quirk to steal the individualities of others, obtaining a lot of power and influence. With his influence he unified a large number of citizens to manipulate them and get them to promote his plans, becoming a ruler of Japan in the shadows. This man was all for one," she explained with her serious gaze as her blonde hair received a draft of air backwards. Izuku was amazed at that because he was surprised at how long the man has been alive. He could remember a few quirks related to anti-aging and regeneration, but he didn't think they could get to the point of keeping him alive for more than 80 years or so since the quirks emerged. He during that time stole a lot of quirks while controlling everything with his power. He had a toxic ideology of controlling everyone and manipulating them to maintain order and his influence. The hero kept talking as he looked up at the sky, then took a sip of his energy drink. Izuku understood that because of the words and ideology he heard from that man the day he gave her all for one. The subject looked like a martyr to the apocalypse or a corrupt society controlled by villains, which was almost the same if you took into account the end of peace and happiness in society. That man had a younger brother who apparently didn't have any quirk. The younger brother had an ideology opposite to his brother's. He thought about freedom and the union of people to forge their own path with their own hands, said the peace symbol with a softer look and a slight smile that did not go unnoticed by Izuku. All for One gave a quirk to his brother. That one had the quality of accumulating power, but something that All for One didn't know was that his brother did have a quirk. He had the ability to transfer his quirk to another successor, All Might explained calmly and with a fixed gaze on Izuku as he activated his muscular form, slightly startling Izuku. The union of these two quirks formed One for All, the ability to accumulate power in addition to succeeding this quirk to someone else. So far there have been 8 users of the One for All, counting me. "And you are number 9, said the blonde muscle man with a Colgate smile and pointed at Izuku with inspiration to seconds later return to his emaciated form and spit out some blood that he ruined a little the moment. "All users have had countless fights against All for One. My predecessor died because of him and I managed to let him defeat him, but apparently he managed to survive despite his extreme state. In exchange for my victory I received this injury that limits me," said All Might with a somewhat annoyed expression as he squeezed the bottle of his drink tightly. Her teacher had died from All for One, and she received a wound that doesn't allow her to save people full-time. After saying this, the surroundings were plunged into a quiet and peaceful silence. The wind blew in the faces of All Might and Izuku while in the background you could hear the waves crashing against the shore. Then they both took a sip of their drinks at the same time. When they both noticed this they found it funny and laughed a little, which served to liven up the atmosphere between them. So that's the story. One for All is something like a torch that user after user increases its power to illuminate and stand out from the darkness, Izuku said with a calm and kind look as he saw his hand, imagining in his mind a torch that increases its fire every time someone else held it. "Well said, young Midoriya. It is like a torch that transfers its energy to another. As the new one becomes stronger, the other loses its brightness. Therefore it is as if the hopes of each user are transferred to the new wielder to overcome the darkness," said All Might with a better mood and a slight smile on his weak and skinny appearance as he placed a hand gently on his face. The back of the green hair. "And now you are the next bearer, the one who will shine on the villains and emit a warmth that shelters the civilians and the people who need to be protected. You will be the torch that symbolizes hope and peace," exclaimed the peace symbol in an inspiring way as he stood up from the fridge with determination and spirit. Then he raised his right fist in the air with emotion. "It's a nice dream, but I think the only one who fulfills that role is your All Might," replied the green-haired man with a slight smile as he continued to sit watching the blonde hero, then took a sip of his drink slowly. always saving everyone with a smile. I don't think I'll be able to match you, but still my goal is to be the best to save them all. Izuku continued serenely after leaving his drink in the fridge, then lowered his gaze thinking about how different he could be once he became a professional hero. He wasn't much of a dazzling smile since his mother died, so he didn't know exactly how he would relieve civilians with his presence. Being intimidating wasn't an option because Endeavor, although he was hero number 2, wasn't well liked due to his seriousness and intimidating aura. Do you know why young Midoriya always smiled? Asked All Might with serenity and a slight smile as he turned to look at his student, who looked at him intrigued. It's because the people who smile in this world with their many flaws are the strongest. I want to convey to everyone that even if it's a difficult or critical moment, you always have to keep a smile that transmits hope, the peace symbol explained in an inspiring way while a current of air reached her back, moving her long blonde locks forward. Izuku, upon hearing this, opened his eyes, surprised and moved by All Might's message. That's a reason that seems too symbolic to me for anyone to know. But I like it. I'll try to transmit that hopeful feeling to others in my own way. I'll be the light that calms and saves everyone who needs it, exclaimed Izuku with determination and in an epic way as he jumped down from the fridge. He then looked at All Might to smile at him with joy and determination in his gaze. The hero in the face of so much enthusiasm reacted in the same way. Very well said. Now to start training, are you ready? Said All Might with a big smile as he extended his hand to Izuku, who without hesitation for a second shook it tightly and confidently. Absolutely, replied the green-haired man with a defiant and excited smile. Now he would begin his training with hero number 1. He had to reciprocate with determination and confidence if he wanted to prove that he was fit to be the next hero number 1. In the night, many hours later, Izuku trained all day with All Might with some very specific and curious routines that pushed the green-haired man to the fucking limit in his beginner control of One for All. The first consisted of carrying all heavy objects such as refrigerators, washing machines, and wooden beams on both arms, balancing for about an hour while All Might threw objects at him that he had to avoid. The green-haired man had to keep the One for All in his arms, and for fractions of seconds he had to distribute part of that power to his legs in order to move without dropping the objects. It was not easy at all because the peace symbol got more excited than usual and began to throw things as if it were a machine gun. The worst thing would be if one of those projectiles actually hit him. The moment that was also done, then it was time for the second routine that tried to make the green-haired man receive many projectiles such as stones or cans against his body, to which he had to harden the specific impact zone with One for All to reduce the damage received. The radical thing was that All Might with his muscular form was the one who threw those projectiles, so the green-haired man, although he did most of them well with some difficulty, ended up in a very bad position with several bruises on his torso and legs. And finally, they did another routine that aimed to train the amount of power that Izuku can hold with 100% in a specific area. So the green-haired man had to activate 100% only in a fist for 10 minutes. The result of this was that it was very difficult for the green-haired man to move his hand for about an hour due to the pain. But according to All Might, if he repeated that process several times on the rest of the body daily, he would be able to control the One for All 100% on his entire body. In short, Izuku's training was completely hellish, getting tired of using his quirk a lot, receiving projectiles thrown by the number 1 hero and also pushing parts of his body to the limit to withstand the One for All more. Once dusk came, they both said goodbye and each went home with the intention of continuing the next day. Now Izuku was walking home in pain but calmly, both hands in his pockets and a slight smile looking up at the sky, reminiscing about his newly started training with his favorite hero since he was a child. I like this day. Who knew that I would end up being a disciple of All Might? Said Izuku with a slight serene smile as he looked at the sky, thinking that he felt incredibly sore from training, so he would go home to rest directly. But on the way, he couldn't help but notice that at an intersection there was a girl standing asking for directions to the few people who passed by. She is slim and short in stature, about 1 meter 65 centimeters, has blonde hair that is tied up in messy buns on each side of her head, sports a straight bangs of uneven cut along with 2 strands of hair that fall down both sides of her face. Her eyes are slightly squinted, yellow, and she has slight dark circles under her eyes. She wears a sailor uniform covered by an oversized button-down sweater that covers most of her skirt and the palm of her hands, and she has black school uniform-style stockings that reach to her knees. No one approached the girl because she had a big smile that could reveal her pronounced canines, so they absurdly thought she was strange and didn't come close to help her. I think I should talk to her, the green-haired man said to himself calmly as he walked towards the blonde to help her with whatever she needed, but before he got there he saw how a robust biker with a punk crest approached to talk to her. Hello sir, could you give me some directions to the nearest shopping mall? Asked the girl named Toga with her big smile as she looked at the man without fear of his appearance and his aura of a vandal. I wouldn't mind, my love, but first follow me somewhere else to tell you more, calmly, replied the biker with a mischievous and disgusting smile as he steered Toga in another direction in a suspicious manner. Of course, sir, thank you very much. The girl thanked with joy and emotion as she began to follow the man with a few slight childish jumps. Izuku thought suspiciously as he watched this. He wouldn't be left to watch anything else while she would possibly be in danger, so he activated his flight quirk called Flight to follow them from the air. He didn't trust the motorcyclist as to his intentions to help the girl. Flight is a quirk that allows Izuku to fly in the literal sense of the word over the skies with complete freedom. However, if you are more specific, this quirk controls the gravity around the user's body, and can also be used to make it so that an individual who is in contact with the user can also be influenced by the gravitational shift. The duration time depends on the user's endurance, but because we're talking about Izuku, it can be extended to at least 30 minutes. The repercussion of overshooting is momentarily losing control of its gravity, which can be harmful and even deadly if the user is in the air at a high altitude. About 5 minutes passed and the man had taken the blonde to a dead end. When he arrived, surprisingly, he did give the blonde directions as he had said. Izuku, still wary of the man's intentions, was looking earnestly, squatting from a rooftop, waiting until he made sure the girl was safe. Then you take the left-hand side and that's it. The motorcyclist finished explaining with a cheerful and surprisingly reliable smile. Thank you very much, sir, now I'd better go. Thanked the girl with her still present big smile and then began to walk towards the exit of the alley with emotion. And my reward, I think I should be rewarded for helping you, don't you think? Asked the vandal with a wicked and disgusting look as he calmly approached the young woman who stopped short when he heard the man. I don't have any money, sir, I guess it'll be for another time. Toga replied calmly while he turned to look at the motorcyclist with his smile just to laugh a little, to which the vandal did not take that answer very well. I don't think so, exclaimed the man maliciously and then jumped towards the blonde with the intention of subduing her and thus satisfying his dirty carnal needs. Izuku thought seriously and wanting to break the man's face while he was still in the air to subdue the young woman. But the green-haired man stopped in his tracks when he noticed how the blonde turned quickly with her big smile to grab the motorcyclist's arm and throw him to the ground forcefully as if it were a martial arts key. Ouch, shit. What? Said the motorcyclist after falling with his face stuck to the concrete and then watching as the blonde subdued him with her arm behind his back. She was on top of him with a slight blush on her face and still had that contented smile that now seemed sadistic and creepy. You didn't want a reward. I'll give you a knife to the chest as a gift, okay, said the girl with a somewhat maniacal and unhinged tone of voice while still maintaining her smile and a slight blush caused by the emotion of the moment. Then, with speed, he twisted the subject's arm a little, causing him to scream a lot in pain that made him think he would lose his arm. The blonde only remained happy with her smile as she watched as the robust man suffered even though he had worse plans for her before. It was just a joke, and you don't need anything, said the vandal with a lot of fear and nervousness as he tried to excuse himself in a pathetic and desperate way. And see, Yisto, I'll stab you and then I'll draw with your blood, Toga insisted with a childish tone while from one of his stockings he took out a very sharp and large serrated knife, which frightened the motorcyclist and alerted Izuku, who was confused by the change of roles. And no, please don't kill me, the man pleaded as he cried a little and hesitated, hoping that the girl would have mercy and not kill him. I promise you, it will hurt a lot and then you'll feel better, exclaimed Toga with joy and madness in his tone, and then took the knife with both hands and raised it in the air and then began to descend it with speed. Enough, Izuku exclaimed loudly as he quickly appeared behind Toga to grab both hands and grab the knife. The green-haired man arrived quickly thanks to the fact that he used the one-for-all on his legs to propel himself by jumping off the walls of the alley even though they hurt like hell. What? Toga exclaimed, surprised and excited when she turns back and sees the tall green-haired man who was holding the knife in his hands, preventing him from stabbing the motorcyclist who was with his eyes closed as he got on top of him. You don't have to do this, Izuku said softly and calmly as he looked at Toga with his green eyes, causing her to stay static for a few moments to think about what to do in that situation while her blush increased, but not due to the feeling of danger. Then the green-haired man easily lifted Toga from his hands, preventing her from moving them. The vandal, once not having the blonde on top of him, got up and was taking the opportunity to run away while running strange because he also shit his pants out of fear. Gee, thank you, kid, thanked the vandal with a victorious and relieved smile as he turned to look at Izuku, who gave a serious and angry look while he saw the motorcyclist out of the corner of his eye, which made Toga blush even more, who was still static looking at him with her eyes open. You can't get out of here either, you bastard, Izuku said quietly and calmly as he pointed his free hand at the fearful and cowardly man. After his hand, he fired a neon red hoop that at high speed reached the motorcyclist's back and then adhered to it, causing the man's body to not move another muscle and fall to the ground completely paralyzed while he was still conscious. That quirk called Immobilize allows the user to expel rings of energy from their hands that when they come into contact with any organic or inorganic body causes it to become completely paralyzed without the option to move. It can be used more specifically, such as to stop the motor skills of the human body or even the heartbeat itself, which can be deadly. The duration of the effect is between 30 and 15 minutes depending on the size of the body being immobilized. Only approximately 7 rings can be fired every 12 hours, so if this limit is exceeded during that time the user will be paralyzed from the legs down for a period of time of 4 minutes. Once Izuku confirmed that Immobilize stopped the motorcyclist's escape, he turned his eyes to see Toga, who had already come to her senses, to start struggling trying to escape the grip of the green-haired man who stopped her assassination attempt. Sui yelled to him, Hiro-kun, don't you see that I need to stab that kind gentleman? Toga said with emotion and a childish tone while still keeping a smile on her face, as if she really hoped that Izuku would let her go to kill the man. I don't think you understand what position you're in, Izuku replied calmly as he stared at the blonde, who didn't give up in her struggle despite seeming useless. Why were you doing that? This is the first time you've tried to do it, asked the green-haired man in a softer tone of voice as he loosened his grip a little so that the girl would calm down in her struggle, a case that did not bear fruit. A few times, but there's always a meddlesome hero like you and interrupts me, Toga replied with sick joy as she continued to struggle hard as if she were a wild animal that she just wanted to kill. Sabius, you shouldn't get involved with my hero-kun. If you get close to me you'll get hurt and I'll have to see your red blood coming out of your body, said the blonde with a little calmness while she saw Izuku with a happy and excited look. Anyone would take that as a threat, but Izuku for fractions of seconds noticed how that look reflected sadness, so I would try to get to the bottom of it. You're not listening to me. Let me go so I can stab you, so you won't suffer after meeting me, exclaims Toga loudly and with her smile as she began to move her legs trying to kick Izuku. The green-haired man received the kicks undeterred despite suffering from the bruises he got in training. I'll stab you again and again. Your blood must surely be very beautiful, hero, Toga shouted as if she were completely insane while her smile seemed to widen in a maniacal and deranged way. Izuku just looked at her with a calmer look than before, which threw Toga off balance and caused her to start frowning furiously. Let go of me, let go of me, let go before you get hurt. I'll stab you and you'll feel better later, the blonde shouted loudly and furiously as she angrily looked at the green-haired man to let her go. He calmly let go of her, surprising Toga, who was perplexed for seconds, but before she could move to escape she felt two hands grab her shoulders. Listen to me clearly, if you haven't killed anyone yet you're free to get on with your life, Izuku spoke softly and with a slight smile trying to calm the blonde as he held her shoulders. Shut up, cried Toga furiously and desperately as she struggled like mad to free herself from the green hair's solid grip. Izuku only saw with some sorrow the state in which Toga was with those earmuffs and her unhinged smile. You still have a long way to go before you throw it all away and become a murderer, the green-haired man continued to speak with a kind and comforting look while smiling slightly at the blonde. I quote I'll stab you, shouted Toga angrily and forcefully as she pulled out another knife from her sleeve with one hand. He grabbed it tightly and then directed it at Izuku's stomach. The green-haired man noticed this and still stood still. The blonde was desperate to escape but stopped the knife just a few centimeters away suddenly. Izuku, seeing this, confirmed some suspicion he had in his mind. Surely you must have had a difficult past, but you must move forward without deviating from the path of good. What would your family say if they saw you now? Said the green-haired man with a comforting and warm look while smiling kindly at Toga, who struggled again trying to escape but this time with less strength. You wouldn't understand, exclaimed Toga with her eyes closed, then gritted her teeth and began to struggle with renewed strength trying to escape. Izuku now knew that there was a deeper reason behind the blonde's actions than the desire to kill. It was fortunate that I read a lot of books on gesture analysis and human psychology. It was very useful when inquiring about a person with ulterior motives. Well, explain it to me so I understand, but I still won't let you murder anyone, the green-haired man replied calmly while he looked a little more seriously at Toga, who began to give many kicks and blows aimed at Izuku, who received them with some pain because his body was still weak from the training of the One for All. Let go, said Toga forcefully and desperately as she clenched her fist tightly and held the knife, pointing it at herself in the stomach, planning to kill herself because she would rather die than be in prison without fulfilling her goal. No, Izuku exclaimed with authority and fury, shaking Toga a little hard to get her to pay attention. She became excited and dropped her knife as she looked perplexed at the green-haired man who had been annoyed. Then, Izuku seriously brought his face a little closer to Toga's face, making her nervous because the green-haired man, although he was annoyed, gave off manhood and power just to then approach the blonde's face with his attractive face. Listen to me clearly, I'm not going to let a beautiful girl like you murder someone and waste her life causing suffering. It doesn't matter what past you've had, what matters is what you're going to do in the future, exclaimed the green-haired man with seriousness, conviction and a soft grip on the blonde's shoulders, who was surprised to hear the green-haired man's moving words and calmed down a little. And you wouldn't say the same thing if you knew me well, hero, Toga replied with her eyes lowered and her hair shadowing her eyes, showing herself emotionally vulnerable. Izuku with a soft look let go of her shoulder to lift Toga's chin and make her look him in the eyes. I have all the time you need so it doesn't matter what, I'll save you, Izuku said with a kind smile and a warm gaze as he saw with his green eyes the beautiful blonde eyes of Toga, who upon hearing those words was emotionally overwhelmed and opened her eyes surprised. What did you say? Asked Toga, perplexed and nervous as she felt the green-haired man's gaze along with his touching and beautiful words as he held her chin, making her see his mesmerizing emerald eyes. I will save you, the green-haired man repeated with confidence, warmth, kindness and sincerity in his words while with a deep gaze he saw Toga and smiled at her with joy, causing a great explosion of emotions and hope to fill Toga's heart. Gee, thank you, the blonde thanked with a voice on the verge of tears while smiling at the green-haired man with warmth and innocence. Toga then dropped his knife to the ground and then put his head on Izuku's shoulder to sob for a few moments. After that, Izuku took Toga home to talk, but not before taking the motorcyclist, who would possibly be a rapist, to jail. Normally, Izuku would be interrogated ad nauseum about what happened and that he shouldn't use his quirks, but because he's the boy who beat the mud villain, he earned a reputation among various heroes and the police force. The police chief, who was beholden to the green-haired man, long turned a blind eye to Izuku's actions and let him go with only a warning. At Izuku's house, after leaving the vandal with the police, Izuku took Toga to her home to learn more about her story. She needed to be helped because she might try to kill someone again and she would deteriorate further into evil and madness, something Izuku would never allow. Now Toga, somewhat calm and somewhat curious, was sitting on the couch in Izuku's living room with the TV off. Izuku had left 2 drinks on the small table in front of the couch and then calmly sat down to stare at the blonde, who was no longer smiling excessively, but had a slight smile and seemed much calmer than before. Now tell me, what's your name? Izuku asked softly and with a faint smile as he calmly looked at Toga. My name is Himiko Toga, I'm 15 years old and I attend Fujitora School, Toga replied calmly while smiling slightly in response to the green-haired man. That's in another district. Why are you here? Do you have family to stay with? Asked Izuku with intrigue and curiosity. No, my family was very strict and cold and I ran away to some aunts and uncles, Toga replied calmly while little by little his expression became sad and depressed, which alerted Izuku that he was on the right track in his questions. And they know about your little assassination attempts, Izuku said calmly and kindly as he took his drink and then took a drink. They died a year ago, crushed by a poster, the blonde replied with sadness and a depressed expression as she looked down. This caused Izuku to choke on his drink for such a tragic response and curiously similar to his story. Cough cough. What? Can you explain yourself in more detail? Asked the green-haired man after coughing while recovering while he watched as the blonde laughed slightly with tenderness because she was amused to see him choking on his drink. Gigi, okay. I was coming home from school and when I got home and saw the news I heard that there had been an attack by a villain in this district. Toga agreed in better spirits while he calmly watched the green-haired man. The atmosphere had eased a little thanks to the funny scene. Then a policeman came to my door to notify me that they had been crushed to death by a poster because of an attack by the villain. The pretty girl continued calmly while her eyes reflected a little sadness. The green-haired man, noticing this, placed a hand on his shoulder to support and comfort her. I had to live alone because I didn't want to go back to my parents. Besides, the girls at school insulted me and said that it was my fault that they died, Toga said more calmly while smiling slightly at the green-haired man. He could remember the mockery and insults in public, receiving laughter from all his classmates. And why is that? Asked Izuku intrigued, while inside she felt pain when she heard her classmates insult her. Because my quirk is a very grotesque one, its name is Trastram, and when I drink someone else's blood I can take on its appearance for a period of time depending on how much I took, Toga explained serenely as she recalled the few times she used it by accident when she was little. Up until that point, he hadn't gone so far as to hurt others due to the hero's interruptions. Plus, he never got around collecting blood to use his quirk to hurt others. The green-haired man, upon hearing that she suffered abuse and ridicule from her classmates because of having an unusual quirk, felt very upset. It reminded him somehow of how he felt on a daily basis when he was made fun of as a mucosai. I think it's a very useful quirk if you ask me, said the green-haired man with sincerity and a slight smile, and then took a sip of his drink. This comment slightly cheered the blonde, who smiled for a moment and then continued counting. Since then I have dropped out of school and come to this district to look for your murderer. It doesn't matter if I have to kill others, Toga concluded with a serious and annoyed look as she clenched her fists. In order to kill the wretch who murdered the only family that was good and kind to her, was willing to kill and hurt others. So you were acting as bait to attract the villain, weren't you? Said Izuku calmly, understanding perfectly the blonde's intentions. If he were in her place, he would possibly seek revenge by falling into despair just like her, acting selfishly, hurting others in order to fulfill his goal. But even if he understood her, he couldn't let her go on with it. He wouldn't let the future ahead of her blonde go to shit for her revenge against a killer who's been dead for a year. Plus, there would surely be few professional heroes who would try to help her once they knew that she had tried to murder multiple times. Yes, it's the easiest way to attract people, Toga replied with a bit of embarrassment because he thought the tactic he has been using was deplorable and cowardly. I live in an abandoned neighborhood not far from here, the girl said calmly as she smiled slightly at the green-haired man. Their lair was just an abandoned building that stray villains don't enter together, so it was a good place to stay. I'm sorry your uncles died, but you would have killed several innocent people in the process. They probably wouldn't have wanted you to do that, Izuku said with a bit of seriousness as he looked at Toga calmly. Toga understood this, but even so the hatred she felt for the villain who murdered her uncles was enormous. They were not to blame for anything to die. They received her with smiles when she left with them. They were kind all the time. They were loved by the neighbors. They were simply the clearest stereotype of good neighbors and relatives that anyone could have. But I can't sit still and wait until he's caught. I want him to die, Toga retorted as she clenched her fists in anger. While she sat there, perhaps the villain was living carefree despite having taken the lives of his kind uncles. "He's already dead, you don't have to go on with this life," replied the green-haired man calmly and with a calm expression, and then took another sip of his drink. These words unsettled Toga, and then a brief silence formed. "What do you mean, Hiro-kun?" asked Toga with a lot of intrigue and longing to know what the green-haired man meant when he said something like that. All of a sudden, he couldn't know who killed his uncles if not even she knew, or did he? "Excuse me for not introducing myself sooner. My name is Izuku Midoriya and like you I'm 15 years old," Izuku said, somewhat embarrassed for forgetting his own presentation because he was concentrating on Toga. Then he looked at her with a cheerful smile as he leaned back on his couch and stretched his arms comfortably. "Are you really 15? asked Toga excitedly and surprised to learn that the tall and handsome green-haired man was the same age as her. She then looked up and down at Izuku's body trying to find coherence in it, but then she was embarrassed by her action and blushed. "Yes, anyway the man who murdered your uncles is already dead," Izuku said calmly as she watched the TV off, then left her drink on the table in front and then looked Toga in the eyes. She was expectant and curious about what the green-haired man would say regarding his murder goal. "You see," said the green-haired man, beginning to tell Toga about the events that had happened the day All For One came to his house to give him his quirk. Toga listened attentively and without asking because when she heard about the officer notifying Izuku about her mother's death she was very sad. This because she had told the green-haired man that he would not understand his fury and hatred towards the villain when the green-haired man had lost the only family he had and supported him being left completely alone. She then heard about how All For One entered the house and proposed to Izuku his quirk, something that confused her until the green-haired man explained it in more detail, surprising the blonde even more, who could not believe it until the story got to the point where Izuku stabbed the villain with his arm blade. Now that this quirk is mentioned, it is called Metallica, which grants the user the ability to turn every part of their body into metal and be able to mold it to create weapons or different shapes for the convenience of the wearer. The main flaw of this quirk is that it exhausts the user once it is prolonged for a long time. Then, upon hearing the whole story, the blonde began to sob with joy upon hearing that the villain who murdered her uncles and the green-haired man's mother had died at the hands of Izuku. His joy was great and he kept listening to the green-haired man while he continued to sob with happiness. But at some point he realized how painful it must be for the green-haired man to wear a quirk that reminds him every day of the fact that his mother was murdered by the man who gave it to him. So he calmed his smile to a sadder expression out of pity for the green-haired man. "Sniff, I'm sorry what happened to your mother," Toga said sincerely as she saw the green-haired man giving her condolences. "Don't worry, I'm alive now to prevent others from losing a loved one," replied the green-haired man with a cheerful smile as he turned to look at Toga. "So you really killed him?" asked the blonde serenely, wanting to listen to him again. She had already asked him 5 times, and every time she heard him she felt like a great burden was released from her shoulders. "I told you I went through it," exclaimed the green-haired man with a bit of stress when he heard the same happy question for the 6th time. He understood that Toga liked to hear it, but 6 times was his limit to answer the same thing. "You're amazing, Izuku-kun, thank you very much, Jijiji," Toga said with joy and happiness while smiling at Izuku, then let out a sweet and melodious laugh that the green-haired man found adorable. "You don't have to thank me, that guy caused his own death by giving me his quirk," Izuku replied calmly and with a slight smile while with his hands he shrugged off the matter. "The man simply wouldn't have died if he had simply given the All For One to someone else." "Then what are you going to do now?" asked the green-haired man calmly and intriguingly as he looked attentively at the blonde, who remained silent for several seconds while she wondered the same thing. "I'm not going back to school. I was only going because my uncles wanted me to go even though I have very good grades. I guess I'll stay in my lair until I see what to do," Toga replied, not quite sure what to do now that her goal of revenge was gone. Then the green-haired man had a great idea that would benefit her, him, and society. "I have a proposal for you," Izuku said calmly and with a gentle smile as he settled on his knees. "Which one is Izuku-kun?" asked Toga with intrigue and curiosity, approaching to listen to the green-haired man. "What do you think if you live here with me?" the green-haired man proposed with his kind and serene expression as he turned to look at Toga, who remained perplexed and motionless for a few seconds processing the green-haired man's proposal. "Really?" Toga asked, unable to believe what the green-haired man was saying. Was he referring to something else and she didn't understand, or was it that the green-haired man wanted to have something with her? "Sure, but in exchange you must try to enter Yui with me," Izuku replied with a calm smile as he pointed his thumb at himself and then pointed his index finger at a calendar on the wall of the room, on which the days of tryouts for the entrance to Yui were marked on some date. "I'm sure you can be a great heroine for infiltrations or hostage rescues with your quirk," said the green-haired man serenely as he saw a perplexed Toga, who couldn't believe such an extravagant condition for a girl who has tried to murder. She just thought that she wouldn't fit in such a place. "Do you really think so? I don't think someone like me is fit to be a hero," Toga said, not very animated, while she was not at all sure if she could be useful to save people when before she thought of killing them if necessary. "Of course I do. Just think of the suffering you and I felt when our family was taken from us. Wouldn't you like to prevent other innocent people from feeling that way?" asked the green-haired man with a kind and warm smile as he looked at Toga. This question completely shook the pensive blonde's mind. She wished that no one else would go through her suffering, so that was the right question to make her react and realize that somehow she did want to save and help others. "In that case, Izuku-kun, accept," exclaimed Toga with joy and conviction as he raised his fists with joy and determination. Now on her face there was a big smile like that of a cheerful girl who received the best motivation of all. Now the blonde had a nobler goal and her thirst for revenge had already disappeared so she could start again on a better path, and all thanks to the green-haired man who cared about her and prevented her from ruining his life. "Great, let's get your things," said the green-haired man excitedly and satisfied as he calmly stood up from his sofa to head for the door. "That's it," Toga said simply and happily as he watched as the green-haired man stopped dead in his tracks at this. "What do you mean?" the boy asked in confusion as he turned to look at the blonde slowly. "I don't have anything else," Toga replied normally, with a slight smile on her face. "Do you only have this outfit and your knives?" asked a perplexed and excited Izuku upon learning this, meaning that he always wore those same clothes all the time and had no material objects or anything like that. "Yes, since there's no one else in my lair, I'll wash my clothes and stay behind," Toga replied innocently as she had an index finger on her chin, remembering the only method she did to keep her clothes clean every day until she was interrupted by Izuku, who tapped her on the shoulder, stopping her. "Too many details. Anyway, I hope we get along, Toga," said the green-haired man with serenity and a warm look while smiling at Toga, who blushed when she felt the touch with Izuku again. Now it was different from the beginning when he kept her still. Now when she felt his big hands touching her, she remembered that pleasant feeling she felt when the green-haired man told her, "I will save you." "I say, Izuku-kun," replied the blonde nervously and blushing while she looked slightly in another direction but still saw out of the corner of her eye the green-haired man, who when he saw her blushing in such a tender way was entranced. "I guess the first thing we'll do tomorrow is go buy you more clothes. You can't walk around the house like that," said the green-haired man, getting out of his car while pointing his hand at the blonde, who upon hearing this calmly stood up from the sofa to stand in front of Izuku. He then began to unbutton his sweater, then began to take off his sailor uniform calmly and quietly, revealing very little of his sky-blue underwear underneath. The green-haired man was getting nervous at the blonde's sudden attitude. She was undressing right in front of him for who knows what reason. "Kiba, what are you doing?" Izuku asked nervously as he turned around quickly so as not to give in to his masculine impulses that were crying out for him to take action. "You said I can't walk around the house like that," Toga replied calmly as she looked at the nervous green-haired man who was avoiding seeing her. Izuku thought with a perverted tone as he turned to look sideways at the beautiful blonde, who had a very attractive body for nothing more than being a 15-year-old girl. As good attributes at first glance, and her figure is seductive despite being covered by her clothes. The green-haired man, with all his efforts, held back those impure thoughts to begin to act in a morally right way. "Even so, you can't undress in front of me. You don't know what I could do to you," said the green-haired man calmly while moving the palm of his hand signaling the blonde to stop, to which she somewhat confusedly obeys. "I don't think you're doing anything wrong. You said you were going to save me," Toga replied with a slight smile and a blush, remembering the green-haired man's words. Now Izuku is the person she trusted the most. The green-haired man wouldn't help her if she was going to do something bad later. He simply gained her trust in such a short time. You shouldn't trust just anyone that easy," Izuku said, somewhat surprised by the trust that the blonde had in him. "Regardless of whether he was nice or not, he is still a man who can fall under his instincts, something he only did when he was with Matsuki alone." "He didn't trust just anyone, he trusted only you," Toga said with a big smile as she looked at the green-haired man with joy. The green-haired man was happy and slightly embarrassed. Then he just walked to the hallway that led to his room without turning to see Toga, who had the buttons of her shirt somewhat unbuttoned. "Anyway, I'm going to give you my clothes for now, so wait a moment," said the green-haired man calmly, and then walked in the direction of his room. Her mother's clothes had been sold 10 months ago because at the time she didn't think she was going to have female visitors, but apparently she was wrong. The blonde with a cheerful and happy smile was getting dressed again while she was grateful for the fact that she had met the green-haired man that day. If he had not appeared to stop her, her life was definitely only going to get worse. She would look for the murderer of her uncles without result until possibly ending in madness. Either way, now she would live under the same roof as the green-haired man with whom she shared the similarity of having lost her family. She would help him just as he helped her, and she would try to enter Yui to become a heroine who would prevent others from losing their loved ones, but above all she would enjoy every moment next to the green-haired man who had captivated her. About 30 minutes later, after a few minutes, Izuku arrived with a change of clothes for Toga to change, gave her a simple white shirt that was too big for the blonde, and gave her a black short that highlighted the girl's waist and thigh due to her good figure. The green-haired man somehow endured seeing her with such a provocative appearance and then put his sweaty clothes and Toga's clothes to wash. Now Izuku was in his room, sitting on his bed while lifting a 100 kilograms weight in one hand without using any quirk, while Toga was in the living room watching some comedy TV shows. I suppose that if he and other quirks can be much more powerful, I might ask All Might tomorrow if I should give it a try. The green-haired man said to himself as he looked at the ground, thinking about the wide variety of combinations he could make of One for All with other quirks to make him more dangerous and stronger. What do I carry with me now? The hopes of all the users, he said with a serious look while calmly leaving his dumbbell on the floor. Now it seemed as if the fact of being a hero was already an obligation to fulfill the expectations that All Might had in him because he was the 9th user of One for All. I hope I can save you all like I was able to do with Toga today, he said with some doubt as he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, then recalled the origin of his goal: save them all, to fill himself with conviction. No, I'm not going to hesitate, I'm going to do it no matter what happens, he exclaimed with a slight smile as he raised a fist over his face and looked at him, determined to fulfill that dream, that of saving them all and thus preventing innocent civilians from dying unjustly. I will fulfill the hopes and dreams of all those who trust me, including the former users who fought to the death to strengthen this quirk. The green-haired man encouraged himself with excitement and conviction as he looked at the ceiling of his room with a slight smile. I will be the best hero in the world, he exclaimed with a raised fist and with a look and a smile full of security and conviction in achieving his dream. He had the support of his favorite hero, and now he had a friend who would share the same goal. He could not be happier with how things are going so far, so lacking support and motivation would not be. Meanwhile, Toga stood outside the green-haired man's room, listening to everything with his ear to the door. She had a big smile on her face when she listened to the green-haired man. If he showed so much determination, she should do the same. Together with him, she would become a heroine who would prevent people from suffering because of the villains. Here, both young men who share the same goal of becoming heroes and the same regret of losing a loved one would start preparing for the entrance examinations to Yui within 10 months. Izuku with his goal of becoming the #1 hero and next symbol of peace who manages to save everyone who needs it, and Toga with his goal of preventing other people from falling into resentment and hatred just like she did. Chapter 4, I Made It Without Being Alone. Times 10 months later. It's been 10 months since Izuku got the one for all thanks to the #1 hero All Might. He has trained with a lot of effort during all that time, pushing his body to the limit. So much was his effort that even All Might himself was impressed when the green-haired man managed to clean the entire beach of trash in just 4 months due to his rapid improvement in the control of the one for all. Against any weather that presented itself, he always gave the best of himself. His condition was deplorable once the training was over, but over time he got used to it until his tiredness and physical exhaustion was not perceptible to anyone, except a blonde who always attended to his most serious wounds. By the way, it's also been 10 months since he met Toga and she started living with him in his house. The girl didn't go to school, so she studied at home whenever she wanted. After all, she could take a test that puts her mental ability and knowledge into an assessment so that it can be appreciated by Yui to take into consideration, and thus let her take the entrance exam to the hero course. He had also begun to improve his skills in melee combat to compensate for his quirk's lack of usefulness in that area. She focused primarily on martial arts such as judo, karate, jiu-jitsu, kung fu, and boxing, combining it all into her own more fluid and agile fighting style that was perfect for her. She and the green-haired man became quite close in these 10 months. After all, it is usual when two people live together for all that time under the same roof. It could well be said that they are best friends who fully trusted each other, laughed with each other, joked, and even went out together on several occasions to the point of seeming like dates in the eyes of others. The daily routine during those 10 months was that Izuku would go to school in the morning and come back in the afternoon, train hard with All Might, and then the rest of the time study or walk around the city with Toga. On the weekends he only trained with All Might and then spent the rest of the time at home, and for most of that time the green-haired man prepared the food until Toga showed interest in helping him. Izuku hadn't told Toga that he trained with All Might himself because he and the #1 hero wanted to keep it their secret. All Might, on the other hand, when Izuku told him about Toga's situation, he was moved by his student's heroic act. But even so, he did not believe that the best idea was to have her in his own home. It should not be forgotten that both were still teenagers of opposite genders. As those 10 months passed, the green-haired man managed to control the one for all, much better, but still a little far from the level that All Might himself, being able to use 70% on his entire body simultaneously, calling that mode full cowl. Not to mention that he experimented a lot with the quirk by combining it with others from the all-for-one, even having several cards to play at the time of a confrontation. Izuku hasn't had contact with his teacher All Might. The last thing he remembers hearing from the blonde was good luck in the Midoriya Youth Entrance exam. I wish you the best of luck and remember to show your potential. The green-haired man didn't worry too much because he knew that All Might was a busy hero, so sooner or later he would see him again. Now both Izuku and Toga were at home already dressed in casual clothes and excited because it was the day they would take the entrance exams to the Great School of Heroes. They were both full of conviction and determined to do their best for both of them to enter the school and thus become great heroes. Izuku wears a gray tracksuit with a simple hood, slightly baggy black pants, and black training wristbands that weighed about 25 kilograms each, which I carried every day mostly out of habit. Toga wears a very comfortable brown coat and something big for her, while on top of it she wore a white scarf with a checkered design, a dark blue skirt that reached her knees, and long black stockings that reached above the knees and were covered by the skirt. "Come on, Izuku-kun, we'll be late," exclaimed Toga excitedly and hurriedly from the door of the house as she put on her brown boots that reached above her calf, hoping that the green-haired man would hurry up so he wouldn't be late for the presentation. "I know, it's just that I confirmed to see if I don't leave anything out," Izuku replied calmly and a little sleepily as he went to Toga to also start putting on his military boots that were black with blue details calmly and a slight smile on his face. Okay, let's go once and for all before they start without us, exclaimed Toga full of joy and excitement as she opened the door of the house to go out together with the green-haired man, dragging him by the arm trying to make him move faster. Well, if you're in such a hurry, come, get on quickly, Izuku said serenely and with a slight smile as he crouched in front of Toga signaling him to climb on his back so that they could fly, to which Toga smiles happily because he liked to fly with Izuku on the few occasions when he allowed it. We'll walk there so they don't call your attention, okay, said Toga trying to act serious and wanting to hide her joy while she climbed on Izuku's back and he held her ignoring the fact of the closeness of their bodies. After all, with time he stopped seeing her with perverted eyes to see her as his best friend. I know I'm the careful one here, Izuku replied with a sideways smile as he prepared to take flight. It was clear that Toga wanted to hide her joy by acting responsibly, but that just didn't sit well with her and that way it was better, according to Izuku. Then Izuku took a big leap by propelling himself through the air, while Toga, once belaying himself well, began to raise his arms as if it were a roller coaster. The good thing is that most people, when they saw them flying from afar, thought they were licensed heroes, so there was no punishment for the green-haired man. At the Joy entrance, now Izuku and Toga were right in front of Yui's Grand Academy, very excited to be right in front of what for them would be the beginning of a new life in which they could prepare to one day be a professional hero who will help the populace and defeat the villains that threaten the peace. Finally here, Izuku said with a serene smile as he looked with some sparkle in his eyes at the Great Academy he has always wanted to attend to be a great hero just like All Might. I never expected I'd be here, Toga said with happiness in her eyes as she turned to see Izuku who, apparently in his own way, showed his excitement. Well, believe it, you earned it with effort, said the green-haired man with a kind and warm look as he looked at Toga and then put a hand on her shoulder to cheer her up. Well, they haven't accepted me yet, Toga said without taking off her smile as she looked at the floor imagining the small but possible case that she won't get to enter the academy. But they will, I'm sure of that, remember all your effort, Izuku comforted calmly as he pulled Toga's chin with one hand for her to see. She was taken by surprise and when she saw her best friend in the green eyes she blushed a little to just nod optimistically. Just look, you've got something in your hair, said Toga with excitement and a big smile as she stared at Izuku's curly hair with feigned amazement. I'm sure it's nothing, said the green-haired man calmly as he let go of Toga serenely and with his eyes closed and then began to walk to Yui's entrance with his hands in the pockets of his sweater in a calm manner. Let me take it off you, Izuku-kun, Toga asked with a smile as if she were a hyperactive little girl as she stood next to Izuku to try to touch her hair, to which the green-haired man tried to defend himself with his hands. Hey, stop before I fall, said Izuku with some annoyance as he tried to get Toga off his back but was interrupted when his friend tripped over a timely stone that caused him to fall looking up. He closed his eyes, expecting to be hit by the ground, but after a few seconds he sees that he didn't feel anything. He then opens his eyes and realizes that his body was being suspended in the air and Toga watched in amazement. Are you alright? Asked a girl next to the green-haired man. She is a thin, light-skinned girl, slender, and has large, round brown eyes. She has straight brown hair that reached her shoulders and parted into two large strands that descended the sides of her face with a small ripple at the back, and finally seemed to have a slight blush underneath her beautiful eyes. Yes, thank you very much for helping me, Izuku replied with a kind smile as he steadied himself with his quirk flight to stand normally on the ground. No problem, that was my individuality so I'm sorry for using it without telling you, but it would be bad if you fell, said the brown-haired girl with a pretty smile directed at Izuku. He nodded with a serene and grateful smile and then turned to look at Toga with some annoyance. If you hadn't bothered me, I wouldn't have tripped over, Izuku said as he looked at Toga and scratched his head, causing the blonde to look away feigning innocence as she shrugged. But nothing happened to you, Toga replied with a slight smile, causing Izuku to pop a somewhat annoyed vein. Then he put Toga aside, which was normally like that, to go back to see the girl who helped him. Anyway, thanks again and I wish you luck in the test, Izuku said with a friendly smile and a cheerful look looking at the girl while with one of his arms he grabbed Toga by the head as a punishment, to which she tried to get away without results being somewhat comical the scene. Don't I know you from somewhere? Asked the brunette with some intrigue as she looked carefully at Izuku's face and her hair and then looked at her body. I could assure you that on TV or somewhere else I had seen those same green curls. I don't think so, let's do our best anyway, Izuku replied calmly, wishing that he wouldn't recognize him from the accident with the mud villain, and then clenched his free fist in a determined way, transmitting encouragement to the chestnut who smiled at that. Yes, exclaimed the girl with encouragement and an excited, determined smile as she raised both fists with conviction. He then waved goodbye to Toga and Izuku with a cute smile and then walked in the direction of Yui's entrance. Izuku smiled slightly and then let go of Toga's head leaving her free. Then he started walking with his hands in his pockets in the direction of the entrance but notices that his friend is not following him and turns to look at her. What are you waiting for? Toga, come quickly, said the green-haired man with a slight smile, hurrying his friend who was with her eyes down while she remained silent and still in her place. It's not fair that you should be like that with other girls, Toga muttered to herself in a low voice, while she was a little annoyed that her green-haired friend had chatted happily with the brunette, which caused a strange feeling inside her. What did you say? Izuku asked curiously as he approached to see what was wrong with Toga, who, when she heard him, was paralyzed with some nerves and then smiled at him in a somewhat silly way. "Nothing, let's get in at once," replied Toga nervously as she hurried to the entrance of the Great Academy with a big smile. Izuku was surprised at Toga's attitude but didn't think much about it and just followed her with a slight smile and his hands in his pockets. At Yui Auditorium, after taking a written exam, Izuku and Toga were taken along with the rest of the boys to what appeared to be a university auditorium where all the aspiring heroes would be waiting for the practical exam to begin until the lights went out and some spotlights appeared pointing at the stage. Then the pro hero present Mike took the stage, which was a tall blonde man with his slicked back hairstyle. He wore a black suit with shoulder pads and inlays, sunglasses, headphones, black boots, black fingerless gloves, and around his neck was a sort of equalizer with speakers and space for cassettes. "Welcome to all kids, say all he," exclaimed Present Mike with emotion and strength, making his voice sound smoothly throughout the auditorium with the intention of brightening up the atmosphere, but he only got a silence from the entire auditorium. "Don't be boring, you should be full of energy," exclaimed Present Mike again without losing heart as he raised a fist to encourage the young people, but the result was simply the same, which made him a little depressed and sigh. "Phew. Anyway, I'll present what the practical exam will consist of, so listen carefully," said Present Mike more calmly and somewhat depressed while behind him some slides that they had prepared for the presentation began to appear. "Who is he, Izuku-kun?" asked Toga with some intrigue as he turned to see Izuku, who was next to him with his hands in his pockets and a serene gaze fixed on the blonde presenter. "He's the professional hero Present Mike who has a radio show and his quirk consists of expelling sound waves from his mouth. Plus he's a teacher of Yui just like other heroes," Izuku replied serenely without turning his gaze while remembering when before his mother died he listened to his radio show without fail with her. Toga nods at this and turns her gaze to pay attention. "As you may already know, in the entry requirements it says that you will be taken to a simulated battlefield for 10 minutes in a city, to which we will take you once the presentation is over," said Present Mike with some encouragement and fluidity while behind him was an image of 4 square blocks each identified with an A, B, C, and D. "You can take whatever you want of the field, and to make sure you know what field you're assigned to, look under your seats," the pro hero continued calmly as he pointed at the youngsters energetically. "Then you basically won't be allowed to team up with your friends," Izuku muttered to himself with a smile as he had a hand on his chin. Then he moved his right hand a little using one of his quirks and from under the seat came a small piece of paper that immediately reached the green-haired man's hands to see. "I'm from Group B," Izuku said calmly as he scratched his head and then turned to look at Toga, who looked a little frustrated. "Oh, I'm from Group D," complained Toga in a slightly high voice as if she were a girl making a scene. Izuku smiled a little embarrassed by his friend's scandal and only supported her with a hand on her shoulder to get her attention. "Okay, either way we'll both get in," Izuku said with a smile, calming Toga a little, who, still frustrated and somewhat annoyed by her bad luck, turned her attention back to the pro hero. "There are 3 different types of robotic imitations that will play villains in battle. They will be organized in a score from 1 to 3 depending on their type," explained Present Mike with energy and a smile while images of 3 models of robotic villains appeared, each one with a number from 1 to 3. "You will earn and accumulate points by defeating them with your quirks. Attacking other participants is obviously forbidden," he continued speaking to make an X with his arms forbidding non-heroic acts. "Don't with me," shouted an annoyed Katsuki loudly from somewhere in the rows behind Izuku, causing Izuku to chuckle under his old friend's obvious and predictable reaction. "Excuse me, Present Mike, can I ask a question?" said a boy with black hair, glasses, muscular build and tall as he stood up from his seat in a very mechanized way raising his hand. "Okay, enter 8645, Present Mike accessed while looking at a list of the incoming and then seeing the guy with glasses. "In the brochure it says that there are 4 types of villains, so I hope it wasn't a fault on the part of the school, because it would be dishonorable for Yui, the best school in all of Japan, to make such an absurd mistake," exclaimed the black-haired man with some robotic movements while showing his brochure where 4 types of robots appeared instead of 3. "And you, the blonde with the disheveled hair," continued the bespectacled boy with a serious look as he pointed his hand at Toga, who was surprised at this. "Who, me?" Toga asked, confused, pointing to herself as she looked around, thinking she was talking to someone else. "You shouldn't talk so much during the presentation, that distracts the others who do want to listen," exclaimed the black-haired boy by way of reprimand while making some mechanized movements that were really a bit strange. Then Izuku calmly stood up from his seat, drawing attention to him. "Excuse me for getting involved, but she hasn't said almost anything, and at least she hasn't interrupted the presentation to ask something that surely Present Mike was going to explain but couldn't because of your interruption. Or am I wrong?" said Izuku calmly while rubbing the back of his head with one hand in a nonchalant way and then turning to look at Present Mike. "That's right, the 4th type of villain or robot is worth 0 points. There's 1 in each battle center and it's a bit difficult to defeat, so it's more of an obstacle that is advisable to avoid," explained Present Mike with emotion and a smile to ease the atmosphere while behind him appeared a silhouette of the missing robot with the number 0. "Thank you very much and I'm sorry for my interruption," said the boy with glasses sternly and seriously, and then sat down in his place to continue paying attention to the blonde. Then Izuku calmly sat back in his seat while Toga looked at him with a grateful smile. "Thank you for defending me, Izuku," Toga thanked with a big cheerful smile that caused the green-haired man to smile too, but more calmly. "Whenever you want," Izuku replied with joy and a kind look as she looked into the eyes of her blonde friend, who stayed like that for a few moments and then woke up from her trance to see the pro-hero. "That would be all I have to say to you young people," Present Mike concluded with a smile on his face as the slides disappeared and the lights in the auditorium lit up the room. "Finally, I will give you as a gift the motto of our school, Plus Ultra, which means going beyond 100% of our capacity. Now get ready for the most exciting event," exclaimed Present Mike with strength and emotion reaching to transmit to everyone part of his enthusiasm, and several began to shout and whistle inspired by the words of the pro-hero. In City B, after separating into groups, Izuku along with the rest of the Group B hopefuls were taken to the front of a large fake city with giant gates as entrances. It was Yui's proving ground, but it was still completely large and immense, surprising everyone, including Izuku. Now everyone was wearing gym clothes for the road test. Izuku wore a black sweater and nothing underneath to make it more comfortable, a baggy dark red jumpsuit, black sneakers with red accents, and his usual wristbands. "It looks like a city," exclaimed one of the male applicants with complete astonishment in his voice at seeing such a size to only be one of the 4 proving grounds for admission. "And it's as big as a real one," added an equally impressed aspirant, while several around her agreed with her. "Yui is really incredible," Izuku said with some astonishment and a slight smile as he looked at the huge doors and then looked around to see if there was anyone he knew. After searching a bit he found the brunette girl who helped him before. She was warming up with a lot of seriousness and concentration while the other people just looked confident and excited about the test. Izuku thought to start walking in the direction of the chestnut but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. When he turned to see who it was, he noticed that it was the black-haired boy in the auditorium, who turned to see where Izuku wanted to go. "That girl seems to want to focus to pass. You shouldn't distract her," said the black-haired boy with seriousness in his eyes as he looked at the green-haired man. Izuku calmly pulled his hand away to slouch a little in front of the boy who was smaller by only 1 centimeter. "Excuse me, but what do you want with me? If it's because of the presentation I only defended my friend so I won't apologize," Izuku said calmly and with a calm expression while he had both hands in his pockets in a nonchalant manner. "I don't hold any resentment about that, it's just that you're here to interfere with the others who really want to concentrate." The bespectacled boy replied still seriously as he shook his head and then stared at Izuku. It didn't sit well with him that someone like Izuku would so casually try to distract the aspirants who wanted to give it their all. "I'm offended that you say that to me. I just want to show what I'm worth just like everyone here. I just wanted to say hello because she helped me this morning," replied the green-haired man with a completely calm expression while scratching the back of his neck with one hand and with the thumb of his other hand pointing to the chestnut behind him. "Isn't that the mud villain boy from 10 months ago?" asked an intrigued and somewhat surprised wannabe as he pointed at Izuku, causing others to pay attention to him and take a closer look, which caused Izuku to sigh annoyed and tired. "The one with more than one quirk?" asked another boy very surprised and excited while he looked better at the green-haired man who was indeed the one who appeared on the news and on the front page 10 months ago. "Wow, it's amazing, he's going to be a tough opponent," exclaimed a hopeful astonished and excited by the tough opponent he would have if what was told on television was true. All these comments caused the bespectacled black-haired man to take a closer look at Izuku and remember the famous incident that happened a long time ago of a simple student who defeated a villain using several quirks. "Are you the boy from 10 months ago?" asked the black-haired boy with some surprise on his face as he robotically stepped back in surprise. "I think I'm being mistaken for someone else," Izuku said somewhat calmly as he had a slightly irritated smile at the exaggerated attention he was receiving for a long-ago affair. "Start, young people," exclaimed Present Mike loudly and excitedly from a watchtower that was there, making everyone hear it and then pressing a red button. Out of nowhere, loudspeakers sounded with an exit alarm as the city gates slowly opened. Izuku reacted seriously to this and immediately ran off in the direction of the city while the other hopefuls looked confused. "What's wrong with you? Do you think that in real life someone will warn you when the fight starts? Death never awaits anyone, so run fast because time is ticking," exclaimed Present Mike with a big smile on his face, causing all the aspirants to start running towards the city using their quirks, pushing each other, making it difficult to move. When everyone enters the city, they notice that several windows of the buildings have been broken, while on the street you can see a large number of robots identified as one point, pointing their sights at the roof of a building. Everyone fixes their eyes on the roof and sees that Izuku is there with an excited smile, while with his arms turned into metal sheets he slices several two-point robots in a fast and agile way. On either side off the roof were 2 Izukus fighting several 3-point robots with their bare fists while encased in a large bucket of perfect cube in midair. "Phew, what the hell?" asked several aspirants, completely dislocated and not knowing what to say while they carved their eyes, hoping not to see triple and not be hallucinating before the large blue cube that was above the air. The 2 clones of Izuku after defeating the 3 points disappeared, turning into dust along with the perfect cube's cube, thus dropping the bits and pieces of the robots on the 1 dots that were on the street pointing at the original Izuku. In this way, several were crushed by the pieces while others dodged, fixing their eyes on the aspirants. They came out of their astonishment to also start attacking the robots that were beginning to appear en masse. In this way, everyone began to fight against the robots, which were actually more skilled than they thought. Several bolts of lightning flew through the air while the lucky students dodged them to fight as best they could. Izuku, once he finished with the 3 points, began to fly through the air in the direction of another group of 3 points that were on another roof. "It's flying," exclaimed a surprised aspirant from the ground as he pointed his hand at the green-haired man, causing several to look at him in surprise, thinking that the news that he had several quirks was true. Izuku, before arriving with the 3 points on the roof, managed to see that in an alley there were several 2 points prepared to ambush the brown girl who helped him along with other aspirants. So with a smile he created several large ice stakes from the palm of his hand to direct them against the robots on the ground. The stakes arrived and defeated several of them, causing the aspirants and the girl to be able to handle the number of enemies that would ambush them. Then the green-haired man got to the 3 stitches to start cutting them again with his metal arms, blades. "Unbelievable," exclaimed a very impressed aspirant who managed to see all this from an ideal distance and then also continued to fight with the numerous robots that did not stop coming out. In Field D. Meanwhile, on Battlefield D, the trial had also begun, and the aspirants were fighting with everything they had against the villainous robots. In an alley a little away from the entire group of aspirants were several robots in a circle surrounding someone. That was Toga, who skillfully jumped on them to give them some strong kicks, destroying their heads and separating some robotic arms with their knives. The blonde, with a cheerful and excited smile, took one of the robot's arms to use the beam to destroy the rest around her. He managed to dodge several shots naturally and then throw his arm, causing it to explode against a 2-point, and thus a chain reaction would wipe out all the robots. "I already have 45 points, Toga said to herself with a smile, keeping track of all the points she had accumulated so far. Behind her stood a 3-point ready to attack the girl, but she quickly and with an excited smile turned to pierce the robot with one of her knives. "How is Izuku doing it now?" asked Toga with some intrigue as he withdrew his arm from the robot, letting it fall to the ground defeated. Then he turned to look at the sky and noticed how little by little the sky was clouding, and at this Toga smiled happily, getting his answer, and then went in search of other robots that were in isolated alleys. In Field A. On the Battlefield A, things were very shaky due to a certain blonde who attracted the attention of all the robots to him. Bakugo stood in the middle of a city block atop a large pile of defeated robots, while with his explosions he defeated others who came for him. 52 points and going up, exclaimed Bakugo with a big smile, very excited and somewhat unhinged, while with his strong explosions he defeated several 3 points that wanted to surround him. "Damn death," shouted Katsuki, full of adrenaline and excitement as he looked up at the sky and clenched his fists, getting the attention of more robots and causing a bit of fear in the aspirants who saw him, thinking he was a wild beast. In Field B. Back on Battlefield B, you could see how the aspirants managed to destroy the robots with their quirks, and some managed to save others who were going to be attacked unexpectedly. In the background, a blonde man could be seen expelling plasma rays from a device located above his navel while he seemed to say a few words in French and made strange poses as if he were showing off. The somewhat tired brunette girl who helped Izuku touched the robots with the palm of her hands, causing them to rise into the air until they reached a certain height, and released them by putting their hands back together. Then the robots fell to the ground to crash and then explode. "I've got 28 stitches, said the girl in a broken voice and taking a few deep breaths, showing how tired she was. Then he moved back in search of more robots to fight. On the other hand, the boy with glasses who spoke to Izuku was moving at high speeds due to exhaust pipes coming out of his calves, also allowing him to kick the robots hard, destroying them and causing them to explode. 46 stitches, the boy exclaimed seriously, keeping track of how many stitches he has, and then continuing to run quickly to help the blonde boy with the laser in his navel, who seemed to be feeling stomach pain and was being surrounded by several robots. While all this was happening in the different camps, in one room there were several figures monitoring the aspirants through a large number of cameras. Those figures were the teachers of Yui Academy, who were sitting around a table carefully watching the performance of the boys. "In the exam there are examiners who tell us how many villains there are and where," said the director of Yui, named Nezu. His appearance seemed to be a small rat, a bear, a small thing with white fur and a suit. "In combat it is necessary to be calm at all times to face the situation well," said Principal Nezu with a smile as he watched the cameras with the other teachers as the boy with glasses and the blonde man with the laser in his navel fought against the robots that wanted to surround them. "Using your abilities to recognize the environment and locate enemies are essential attributes to have an advantage in any situation." Nezu continued to speak calmly and looked at another camera where separately a boy with 6 arms appeared, watching the whole place locating enemies, while in another camera was a girl in punk clothes using her quirk against the ground to locate other robots. "Agility and instinct are also great factors that can be used in a variety of ways," the director continued, watching other cameras as Toga and Katsuki defeated their enemies with skill and speed as if they were moving by pure instinct. Afterwards, the principal and the rest of the teachers turned their eyes to one of the monitors where they could see how Izuku used his ice quirk to pierce several robots while releasing several red beams of electricity that pierced or immobilized all the robots he was fighting. "But what?" exclaimed the principal and some other teachers, while others opened their eyes in surprise at such a young man who was presenting several quirks. Then, Izuku on camera flew in the direction of another building while having a defiant and excited smile on his face. "That kid is presenting a lot of quirks," said a professor in a red suit and white hair in amazement and very surprised as he placed both hands on the table and stood up from his seat following Izuku's movements through the cameras. "Who in that boy?" asked another hero with a strange appearance as if he were covered in cement while he was very intrigued and surprised. He along with everyone watched as the young green-haired man arrived at an alley where there were several three-point robots to launch a large amount of jet-black flames of fire from his left arm, destroying them easily. But this fire caused the sleeve of his black sweatshirt to burn, leaving his strong arm and part of his left chest exposed. "It's the 9,986th entrant, 15-year-old Izuku Midoriya," a teacher with long black hair replied calmly as he looked at the young man's identity on a list of applicants. Even if he hit it, he was just as surprised by the green-haired man's performance and the fact that he had those powerful quirks. "What are your quirks?" asked a professor who looked like an animal, like a beast. The black-haired professor calmly went through Izuku's papers and then answered. "I don't put it in, he just wrote it's too many to write them," replied the black-haired hero with a slight smile because he was amused by what the green-haired man wrote. This response caused a blonde man in an oversized yellow suit and a woman in a sexy outfit to laugh a little. "He's killing most of the robots, the rest of the participants will barely be able to defeat some of them," said another teacher in a cowboy outfit and a mask covering his face. Hearing this, All Might, who had finished laughing, stood up from his seat with a big smile, drawing attention to himself. "That's the reality of professional heroes. You have to make your way yourself over the rest of the heroes," said hero number 1 with his hands on his waist as he watched as his student continued to destroy robots and help several that were in danger. "That boy is definitely very promising," said a black-haired heroine with a slight mischievous smile as she watched intently as the handsome young green-haired man was helping a group that was being attacked with his arms, blades. "Then it's time for us to make this test more difficult," Nezu said with a faint smile, somewhat malevolent, though not perceptible by his cute animal face as he pressed a large red button. After pressing that button, a tremor was felt throughout the battlefields due to something being activated, although to be more precise 4 machines had been turned on, which would attract a lot of attention from all the aspirants. Back in the exam there was a huge tremor that caught the attention of all the aspirants who were defeating the few robots that were left. Then a large screen of smoke was raised and it was possible to see how an immense robot of a height greater than that of all the buildings destroyed part of one, causing several pieces of debris to fall. All the young people watched this scared and amazed until one shouted, "The 0 points," causing everyone to start running away from the imposing robot that only said in the form of a loop, "Imminent destruction, assured death," to scare the boys and then give a big stomp that created a current of air that caused several to almost fly away. Izuku saw this calmly and a cold look on his face as to whether it was better for him to spend the little time he had left in the race to fight such an immense robot. But when he observed that he began to destroy several buildings, causing their debris to fall, threatening to crush some aspirants, the green-haired man quickly began to destroy said debris with his ice, with the red rays, with the black flames and with his arms simply composed of metal to save them all. Then, when the green-haired man saw that everyone was safe, he flew away in the opposite direction from where the robot came from, and then landed on the ground and started running until a sound stopped him. "It," was a girl's cry of pain from behind him, causing him to slowly turn his gaze to see what caused the sound. When he looks closely, he sees the brown girl who helped him trying to remove a large piece of debris from his foot with a lot of effort. "Help, please help me," asked the girl in fear, fearing for her life as she tried to remove the debris with her quirk, but her tiredness prevented her from doing so. El peliverd con una mirada muy seria y por puro instinto mientras que apretaba los puños comenzó a correr en dirección al gran robot para salvar a la chica que necesitaba ayuda. Pasó rápidamente al lado del palangro con gafas que estaba cayendo del robot causando que se detuviera algo confuso. Se preguntaba el chico de gafas muy confuso y bastante intrigado mientras que volteaba la mirada para ver como el peliverd con determinación en su mirada corría en dirección al intimidante y inmenso robot. Al estar relativamente cerca via como el robot estaba por pisar a la chica por lo que lanzó un arrow de inmovilize en dirección al pie del robot deteniéndolo en seco sorprendiendo a la chica y al resto de personas que lo vean. No hay ninguna ventaja o mérito al vencer al villano de 0 puntos, decía All Might con una gran sonrisa y de manera alegre mientras que el junto con los demás profesores veían atentamente al peliverd. Luego Izuku se inclinó activando el one for all en sus piernas tomando impulso para disputar saltar con mucha fuerza causando un cráter en el suelo para salir disparado a gran velocidad en dirección al gran robot. Flush. It was the sound that came as Izuku darted toward the big robot. Then, in the air, he picked up his right arm to clench his fist very tightly and thus charge him completely with the one for all, causing the sleeve that covered his arm to be completely destroyed, revealing his arm with that characteristic reddish appearance with green rays. Then in the air he recalled some words of his master All Might. When you use the one for all, shout from the depths of your soul and with determination to release all your power with a few words. Izuku recalled as he flew to the face of the big robot. FWOOOSH. It's the sound of jet black flames engulfing Izuku's arm as he gritted his teeth tightly. SHHIUUUUMM. That's what was heard when crimson-red rays emanated from the green-haired man's arm, which, together with the black flames, left behind the young man a very impressive trail. Then the green-haired man took a deep breath to take a deep breath from the back of his being, showing that he really wanted to save the girl. But that presents an opportunity to shine brightly and rise to the surface for all to see, exclaimed All Might, burning with excitement and inspiration, as every moment he saw his student demonstrate so much power he became even happier. Totally SMAAASH. TOOOW. It was the sound of the colossal impact as Izuku's fist met the robot's face as Izuku slammed it upwards. Then, the head of the giant robot sank from the strong impact and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared from everyone's sight, detaching itself from the body and shooting out into the cloudy sky, causing it to be forcibly cleared. Everyone, including the pro-heroes, stood with their jaws open and wide-eyed as they stared at the headless body of the great robot. All Might, on the other hand, was pleasantly surprised as he maintained a big, dazzling smile of pride. But it didn't end there because Izuku was still propelled upwards in the air by the amount of momentum he took, thus staying at a height high enough to see that far away outside the limits of Camp B were the other 3 cities. Izuku came up with an idea at this and with an excited smile closed his eyes to open them later, but they looked different. These didn't have any normal features of an eye and were just eyeballs with what appeared to be stars inside, kind of like they had the galactic cosmos inside their eyeballs. He quickly activated his quirk to visualize how in cities A, C, and D there were other zero-point robots making a ruckus and about to harm several aspirants. At this he smiled defiantly to charge his 2 fists in the air to use pulse at full power, being backed up with the one for all, first directing his 2 fists in 2 different directions pointing at cities A and D, and then joining both arms at his waist charging them and then giving a super pulse of air with both fists together in the direction of city C, which was the closest. The 3 pulses at a high speed shot out in those 3 directions, causing the sky to clear where they were passing and the power of the wind to be felt threatening to take everything in its path. In Field A, Katsuki on Field A was defeating several 3-point robots and then visualized a large robot that was the 0-point approaching him. Apparently, that robot appeared on the other side of the city and it took him a while to get to Katsuki, which attracted the attention of all the robots due to its danger level. "That's it, come to my bastard," exclaimed the blonde with excitement and a big wild and aggressive smile directed at the big robot that could perhaps present him with a challenge. Near the robot were several aspirants fleeing from the debris caused by the robot, but to avoid them they were very slow and the big robot was about to step on them with force until FLUUUSH. He received a heavy blow of air from Camp B which caused his head to be pierced and he fell sideways into a building without injuring anyone. "What the hell?" Katsuki exclaimed with his eyes wide open without being able to believe his eyes. Out of nowhere a strong pulse of air had knocked down the large robot right in front of him. Out of nowhere he remembered the events with the mud villain and how Izuku threw a punch that caused a strong current of air. Thought Katsuki, gritting his teeth and with a lot of frustration as he watched as all the boys looked at the defeated robot confused but grateful to whoever defeated him. In Field D, on Course D, things weren't exactly smooth as several challengers battled the 0 points with their flashy quirks without being able to knock it down. A boy with the head of a crow and a strange shadow being coming out of his back was trying to destroy his feet, but he was very resistant. A blonde boy who controlled the electricity was looking silly walking around because he used his quirk a lot against the big robot without achieving any results. Another boy was one with red hair who had hardened arms, only helping the girls escape the debris caused by the big robot. Toga, on the other hand, was no stranger to confronting that with simple knives, so she stood on a rooftop at a safe distance while she watched everyone fight against the huge robot. Then the blonde noticed that the robotic villain was walking in the direction of stepping on a girl with pink hair and skin who had been cornered in several pieces of rubble and was in a hurry trying to get rid of the thick debris with her acid. Toga at high speed and by pure instinct he was already jumping from rooftop to quickly reach the pink girl. He didn't remember feeling that feeling inside him that drove him to save other people, but he just obeyed, feeling that it was the right thing to do. "I'll help you," exclaimed Toga with determination and a serious look as she stood in front of the girl to try to lift the immense rubble of the building that held her captive. The girl was surprised to see the blonde helping her, but it was still too risky for her. "Run away quickly before I crush you too," exclaimed the pink-skinned girl worriedly and very fearfully as she tried to release more acid to melt the debris. Toga ignored her and kept trying to free her, but she wasn't strong enough to pick up such a piece of rubble. The foot of the big robot was approaching and Toga, more than fearing for her life, was afraid that she would not be able to help the hairy woman, so she only stood to extend her arms with the intention of stopping the footprint of the big robot, which was completely crazy and she already knew it. Now she thought she was the fool, but she still did not regret it. "I won't leave you here," she exclaimed forcefully and with her eyes closed, causing the pink-haired girl to feel very moved, but then she fears for the safety of the blonde who wanted to help her. Then they both closed their eyes waiting for the end until FLUUUUUUSH. The big robot received a powerful blow from a current of air that greeted it head-on, causing it to fall backwards with its face buoyant, sunken and somewhat detached from its body, causing all the aspirants there to be greatly surprised. Out of nowhere, a big blow of air comes and defeats the robot that they have tried so hard to knock down. The pink girl and Toga smiled and then breathed a sigh of relief that they were safe. "Wow, you even made it this far," exclaimed Toga with joy and a big smile as she followed with her eyes the trail of clear clouds from which the pulse came, knowing that it was Izuku who saved her with his quirk pulse in the vision one. Toga thought, very grateful and happy to have the green-haired man covering her back even though they were so far apart. Then, calmly, I helped the pink-haired girl out, chatting with her and sympathizing very well, and then, in the short time that remained, fight as a team. In Field C, on the other hand, in City C it was a catastrophe. The chaos that the 0 points were causing because several aspirants were being cornered against the city limits while fighting an immense number of robots and the 0 points was approaching imposingly. The small boy with purple hair was seen with the naked eye crying for his life while he was in a fetal position on the ground. There was also a black-haired boy who pulled straps out of his elbows trying to immobilize enemies to flee, but it was useless when there were so many. It was also possible to visualize a girl with frog features and large eyes who with her tongue and jumping helped as much as she could to defeat the numerous robots before the 0 points arrived. It was not possible for them to get out of that place and they could only hope that someone with an advantageous quirk would support them to flee, but as in the other two cities. The large robot received a very powerful blow to the head from the back, causing its head to detach from its body. And that due to its height it exceeds the limits of the city, falling in the area outside, the one where there was nothing. The immense amount of air caused all the robots to fly against the walls, exploding on impact, while the aspirants hid in alleys to avoid being blown away by such powerful air pressure. Whoever helped them was incredibly powerful enough to defeat such a large machine with just the air pressure. But what no aspirant in each city knew was that the same thing had happened in the others. Return to Field B. Going back to the moment where Izuku gave his pulse punches, the green-haired man with low speed relying on his quirk flight to get as fast as possible to the ground to freeze the headless body of the 0 points so that it would not fall on the brunette girl who was with her mouth open very surprised. "He beat the 0 points in one fell swoop," exclaimed an aspirant surprised to the extreme as he fell on his butt pointing to the green-haired man who descended to the ground breathing deeply and seeming to smile. "He's a monster, I wouldn't want to face him," said another boy with some fear in his tone as he hugged himself, wishing he never fought the green-haired man. "How come you have several quirks?" asked a girl with a lot of intrigue, leaving aside how surprised she was. "After all, you've never met someone who will present more than one quirk in society." Meanwhile, in the test monitoring room, all the heroes, teachers were completely shocked and stunned at what they had witnessed. The green-haired man with several quirks not only managed to beat 0 points, but he beat them all. "This has never happened before, the 4 0 points have been beaten," exclaimed Snipe very surprised from under his mask. "I'm just as surprised as you are," said the black-haired heroine with a big mesmerized smile as she saw the green-haired man and his strong arms exposed with his torn sweater. Although she was amazed by the power of the green hair, she was more concerned with the young man's attractive appearance. Thought All Might with much excitement and pride directed towards his student. He knew he could beat 0 points if he put his mind to it, but to do the way he did and also beat them all was to exceed his expectations abysmally. "That act is the self-sacrifice that every hero must present, ha!" exclaims All Might without being able to hold all the emotion he was holding, causing him to start laughing out loud while radiating energy and spirit, receiving support from the other teachers who thought the same. "Unbelievable, how is it?" said the long-haired black-haired hero surprised, wondering how that green-haired man could be so strong and then staring at his papers with the intention of investigating the boy further. In Field B everyone looked astonished at the green-haired man, who barely recovered from the fatigue he felt from wasting so much energy in his powerful attacks, went to help the chestnut that by the strong blow that Izuku gave was freed from the rubble that held it. But even so, she was on the ground, watching in surprise as the green-haired man who was her savior, her hero, approached. "I'm finishing the test, yeah," exclaimed Present Mike with joy and a lot of emotion, letting out all the surprise in that shout of encouragement that was mainly directed at the green-haired man who had given a whole show, yeahh. Thought the green-haired man incredibly relieved as he felt how every step he took his eyes hurt hard from using Perfect Cube and the Vision Quirk a lot. His arms and legs, which overloaded them with 100% of the One for All, were stiff and it was fortunate that he could still move them without having waited a few minutes. There was also the extreme fatigue from using Frost heavily, which had him really exhausted and on the verge of passing out. Added to this was the ardor of using his flames of fire a lot and the various spasms he felt from overusing the red rays. All in all, while it was amazing to use several different quirks at the same time, it was incredibly detrimental to him. If he didn't have a healing and regeneration quirks, he might even be dead from the repercussions his body is exposed to. "Hello again, are you okay? Let me help you," Izuku said with a kind smile as he approached the chestnut, ignoring all the suffering he was feeling. The girl, in response, smiled somewhat cheerfully and nervously, but above all grateful. "Thank you very much, you were incredible, The girl replied with a somewhat stuttering voice at first as she tried to stand up but was interrupted by her scream caused by the incredible pain she had in her foot, causing her to lose her balance and almost fall to the ground. But Izuku rushed and held her, preventing her from reaching the floor. "Don't worry, I'll take you to get checked out," said the green-haired man with a kind, calm smile full of warmth and concern as he looked intently at the girl. Then he carried her bridal style with his arms bare. "Gee, thank you," thanked the brunette nervously and blushing a little strong while she was a little embarrassed to be carried in that way as well as feeling the strong arms of the green-haired man. "Why were you suddenly sick and weak?" Izuku asked with some intrigue as she walked in the direction of the group of aspirants who seemed to be resting after the grueling ordeal. "Well, it's the side effect of my quirk. When I use it a lot and overexertion it causes me nausea," the girl replied with some embarrassment for talking about such an embarrassing repercussion of her quirk. Izuku thought wearily, knowing better than anyone how annoying the repercussions of a quirk can be. "Anyway, thank you." The brunette thanked again with a cute smile directed at the green-haired man and then left a silence because he didn't know the boy's name. Izuku Midoriya, it's nice to meet you." The green-haired man introduced himself with a big smile while he improved the grip with which he held the girl to also leave a silence. "My name is Uraraka Achako." The now well-known Uraraka finally introduced herself with a slight nervous tone and then smiled back at her hero. "Nice to meet you, Uraraka," Izuku said with excitement and a bright smile that left Uraraka mesmerized for a few seconds until she woke up from her trance. "Same Izuku-kun," replied Uraraka with the same excitement as the green-haired man as they were already arriving with the group of hopefuls from Group B who watched the green-haired man in surprise and astonishment, whispering compliments and comments of their astonishment. Thought the boy with glasses looking at the green-haired man holding Achako. Thought the black-haired man with some frustration as he clenched his fists thinking that he was running away while the green-haired man was determined to save her. The black-haired man said to himself with a slight smile because that was very clear to him when for fractions of a second he noticed Izuku's intense gaze. "Good job to everyone," congratulated a small old lady of short stature who was standing on a cane in the shape of a syringe. Her outfit consists of black pants, a blouse tied in the middle by her belt, and a lab coat. Her hair is tied to a mesh and she has a syringe in it as an ornament. "It's Yui's spine, it's Nurse Recovery Girl," exclaimed the blonde boy with the laser in his belly button as he pointed to the little old lady who passed from boy to boy, healing them with a kiss and then giving them a piece of candy. "You did amazing, boy," the old recovery girl congratulated with a kind smile as she stood in front of the tall green-haired man who was delicately lowering Uraraka. "Thank you, but could I heal her quickly please?" Izuku asked with politeness and respect in his voice as he smiled at recovery girl. "Musk." The old lady kissed Uraraka on the arm because it caused a small pink aura to envelop the chestnut, causing it to show better health and less tiredness and dizziness. "I feel better now," exclaimed Uraraka happily, while she could move her feet without any pain in her ankle and was hardly dizzy. The green-haired man smiled at Uraraka to nod, feeling very relieved that she was okay. "Is anyone else hurt?" Recovery girl asked politely as she checked to see if anyone else needed to be healed. The truth is that what was in his mind was the astonishing spectacle given by the green-haired boy, who had the makings of a hero no matter what. How did Toga fare? Izuku wondered curiously as he looked in the direction of City D. She knew her friend would have done great, but she still wanted to know once and for all how she did and how she felt. Although surely the blonde would not stop talking about it, so sooner or later she would find out every detail. Times 1 week later. A week passed since the road test and Toga and Izuku passed the time as usual, as if nothing had happened. They didn't have many concerns and only mentioned what they did during the tests in great detail due to Toga's insistence. Now Izuku was on the couch in the living room reading a manga about pirates and fruits that grant powers, while Toga went to the door to attend to whoever had rang the doorbell seconds before. "Izuku," exclaimed Toga from the door of the house loudly, causing the alerted green-haired man to jump off the couch to quickly reach his side after a short run. "What happened, Toga?" Izuku asked, very worried about his friend, to see her with a big smile as she held a package and an envelope that had Yui's insignia on them. "They have just arrived from Yui," replied Toga with great emotion as she jumped up and down very happily and with high expectations waiting to have entered. The green-haired man opens his eyes surprised and also draws a smile on his face and then with the blonde go to the sofa to open the things they have been waiting for a week. "Why do you just get a letter?" Izuku asked with some intrigue as he noticed the detail. It was odd the fact that they notified him in different ways, but Toga, not caring much, shrugged his shoulders with a smile. "I have no idea, but what I do know is that I'll open it first," exclaimed Toga very happily and with a lot of emotion that was perceptible from afar. Izuku smiled happily when she saw her friend like this and then saw how Toga opened the envelope to read it carefully with a big smile on her face. "I came in," the blonde said in a whisper to herself that was heard by Izuku. It was as if she was convincing herself of the wonderful news. She had managed to get into the best hero school in all of Japan. "Come in, yes," exclaimed Toga very happily and animatedly, getting up from the sofa quickly to start jumping for joy, extending her hands in the air with the envelope still in her hands. "I'm happy for you, Toga," congratulated Izuku happily and with a big smile, very happy for her best friend, who for many months was eager to enter Yui and now she had achieved it, making it clear that all her efforts paid off. The green-haired man then looked at his package to unwrap it carefully. Once finished, it was revealed that inside was a disc with a sphere in the middle appearing to be something like those experimental holograms that were coming out recently. "Now, is this a hologram or something?" said the green-haired man, somewhat confused by the true functionality of the disc as he stood up from his post to turn off the lights. Then he calmly put the record on the table while Toga, very excited, went to her room to hang the letter on one of her walls. The device, as soon as Izuku touched its center, let out a projection that appeared in front of Izuku. "I'm here in a hologram surprising you," exclaimed All Might with a big smile while dressed in a yellow striped business suit to the surprise of Izuku, who didn't expect that at all. "All Might, what are you doing there? What is this exactly?" Izuku bombarded questions without understanding how his master was in a hologram sent by Yui until he used that brilliant detective brain of his to solve the mystery. If he hadn't spoken to All Might for weeks, it was because the hero might well be settling down in the city to somehow be integral to Yui, most likely as a teacher, and that's why he would appear in the hologram exclusively for him. "I'm sorry you couldn't contact me earlier, young Midoriya. I was moving to the city to be a teacher in Yui," All Might said calmly as he looked at his student, who mentally only said to himself it was elementary, my dear Watson, while only nodding with a satisfied smile. "Okay, let's get to the good stuff I'm sure you're going to like," commented the number one hero with noticeable emotion for Izuku, who paid attention serenely because now his master would tell him what he's been waiting for a week. "In the written exam, by about 3 points difference, you came out on top, being the best grade," the blonde announced happily, giving a round of applause to his student who was just above another very intelligent student named Yaoyorozu. "I didn't expect him to come first, I'm sure it was just luck," replied the green-haired man with serenity and a slight smile, somewhat embarrassed because he seriously thought that his place was obtained by pure luck. "Indeed, your humility can become annoying when you don't realize all the good you do. Leaving aside your modesty, in the practical exam with your incredible performance you obtained 146 villain points, being the one with the highest score of all," exclaimed All Might with great pride while behind him appears a lot of streamer and a background sound of trumpets, causing little by little Izuku's heart to tighten while a trembling smile was drawn on his face. "I did it, I really did it," the green-haired man said to himself happily while little by little he remembered all the insults that told him that he could never be a hero and that he should give up. "But wait until I finish talking because this gets better. Now I want you to watch this video," said All Might with emotion and his tone attracting the attention of his green-haired student and then putting a video on the hologram to then play it. "Excuse me, Edo, I have something to tell you," said Uraka, trying to say something to a hero who, from the little he looks at, would seem to be present. "Mike, Uraka?" asked Izuku, confused and intrigued by the presence of the girl in the video that showed him All Might. "She came after the exam to negotiate with us about something," All Might replied happily to enlarge the video. "Could the tall, freckled, green-haired boy be given some of my points?" asked Uraka with some shyness as he clasped his hands in plea as he looked at present Mike. This surprised Izuku, who didn't expect the chestnut to propose that. After all, what did he do to deserve her act of kindness, was the question the green-haired man was asking. "He's a very nice guy who really deserves to go to the academy. If it wasn't for him I don't know if I'd even be here. He saved me when I needed help. So please," Uraka said with feeling and conviction and then just lowered her gaze whispering, "I want him to come in, he deserves it," and then the video was paused. At this, Izuku felt his heart race at times and he rejoiced at Uraka's intentions. "Because of your heroic actions you caused others to act. The entrance exam doesn't just take into account villain points," All Might said happily and calmly as the image of the video disappeared leaving only All Might in front of a red curtain. "You don't believe that a school would reject those who do good and show what it is to be a hero, do you?" asked the blonde with emotion and a bright smile as he watched as Izuku slowly opened his eyes to the touching and meaningful words of his teacher whom he saw as a father in some way. "You know very well as I do that a hero is not only one who fights against villains, but also risks his own life to save the innocent who needs help," exclaimed All Might happily as he clenched a fist in front of him in such an inspiring manner, causing the green-haired man to remember the time he protected a child from the abuse of Kekken and his friends. "For this reason, even if you hadn't defeated any villains, you would have been approved thanks to the rescue points that are given by Yui's own staff." The hero continued with joy, remembering how all the teachers gave their great first impression of their green-haired student of whom he was incredibly proud. "Because you saved many students from the common robots and managed to save many by defeating 4 Lek OUT of 0 points, you managed to get a score of 170 hero points, something that had never been seen before in Yui," announced the number one hero with a lot of joy and happiness while behind him appeared the list of scores where he appeared in the first place while the rest were not seen. "Good for All Might's big body. Really, I didn't expect them to give so many points for defeating them. Anyway, I only did it to help the other candidates, not to earn points," replied the green-haired man, trying to keep his serenity even though inside he was softening a lot to be living the moment that he waited for so much since he was little and that surely his mother would have wanted to witness. "And that's something that I applaud you with great pride, young Midoriya. You managed to get in with your effort," said All Might while applauding the green-haired man with great energy, who at every moment that passed felt how his smile trembled and his eyes moistened a little. And in case you're interested, Himiko Toga 70 villain points and 30 rescue points. Uraraka Achako 47 villain points, announced the number 1 hero, knowing that his student might be curious to know the score of both girls. The green-haired man, seeing Toga's 30 rescue points, recalled when she told him about how she tried to save a girl who, although he remembers, was named Mina Shido. "You all passed young Midoriya," exclaimed the hero, happily extending both hands to Izuku, while behind him came confetti, streamers, and a large light illuminated hero number 1, making the moment more touching. Then All Might slowly but with a cheerful smile extended his hand to the screen as if offering it to Izuku. "Now come, boy," said the hero in a calm voice, causing some tears to fall down the cheeks of the green-haired man. "This is your Hero Academy," exclaimed Izuku's favorite hero, welcoming him to the academy I have been wanting to enter for many years. The green-haired man thought to himself as he looked down, wiping his tears with his shirt, imagining how happy his mom would be to find out that now she could fulfill her dream. Imagining her with a big smile as tears streamed down her cheeks, proud of her son, was devastating. To think that she could fire him on the first day of school, as she had done all her life, was the green-hair's longing. But now what mattered was to move on. Not only for him, but for his master, the former one for all wearers, all the innocents, Toga, and of course his mother, who wanted him to move on with a big smile. "Yes, SENSEI, exclaimed Izuku in response as he smiled like he hadn't done in a long time. His big smile, full of joy and feelings, made the hero very happy, who, after saying goodbye with his hand, turned off the hologram, leaving Izuku on the couch still maintaining his smile from the depths of his soul. Toga came back to the room to find Izuku red-eyed while smiling with a lot of happiness and peace. She didn't ask anything because it was evident that he was also accepted, and as long as he was happy there was no need to ask questions.
Thanks for watching, legends. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more epic What If Deku stories and fresh updates. Hit that bell so you never miss the next upload. See you in the next one.